They say the workplace is for building careers. But for some, it became the perfect place to build lies, cross lines, and break hearts. 10 stories, 10 betrayals. From late-night meetings to locked hotel rooms. From whispered promises to leaked footage. Some lost their jobs, others lost their families, and a few, they lost everything. These aren't love stories. These are infidelity chronicles. Jessica always laughed at office scandals she saw online. That would never happen to me, she once said to her husband with the unshakable confidence of someone who believed herself to be immune to chaos. But in the end, Jessica Morgan became nothing more than a silent clip passed from phone to phone. Played over cheap laughter in break rooms. At 28, Jessica was the kind of woman who looked like she had everything figured out. Assistant to the executive director at a prestigious financial firm in downtown Chicago. She wore her ambition like perfume, subtle, lingering, but always present. She wasn't loud, never overly assertive. Her power came from being poised, observant, intelligent. People trusted her because she listened. People liked her because she never demanded to be liked. And yet, despite everything she gave to the company, her name had remained frozen on the same office door for 3 years. Daniel, her husband, was her opposite in many ways. A high school history teacher who still believed in chalkboards, handwritten notes, and the sanctity of Sunday mornings. He loved her with the steady reverence of a man who still said grace before dinner. He never competed with her success. In fact, he celebrated it. When she got her first big client, he made her pancakes in the shape of dollar signs. When she pulled her first all-nighter at the firm, he stayed up too, just to bring her tea at 3 a.m. They had a rhythm, or at least, they used to. Lately, Jessica's rhythms had changed. She would come home later and later, her key fumbling at the lock long after Daniel had already brushed his teeth and dimmed the lights. When he kissed her goodnight, she often turned her cheek instead of her lips. Her phone, once carelessly tossed on the kitchen counter, now never left her side. She began to put it face down, sometimes even turning off notifications completely. Daniel noticed. Of course, he noticed. The little things first. Her absent-minded nods at dinner. The sudden bursts of attention when she caught him watching her too closely. The almost imperceptible guilt in her smile. She started showering late at night. She had new clothes. Nothing dramatic, just slightly more expensive blouses. Heels a little too tall for her usual taste. A new perfume, faintly musky, something he didn't recognize. At first, he told himself she was just evolving, working harder, trying to stay competitive. The industry was brutal. After all, maybe she was just tired. But then there were the lies. Small, delicate lies. The kind you might believe if you wanted to believe. Team meeting ran long. We had a surprise deadline. Networking drinks with clients. They came too easily, like rehearsed lines from a well-worn script. One night, Jessica came home and Daniel decided not to ask anything. Instead, he watched her move through their apartment like a ghost. She went straight to the shower, steam curling out under the door. Daniel sat in silence, the television flickering across his face. Playing a sitcom neither of them watched anymore. He tried to remember the last time she had touched him. When she fell asleep that night, Daniel lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. But she didn't stir. He didn't reach for it. He didn't need to. The next evening, when she got into the shower again, Daniel found himself standing in front of her purse. His hand trembled slightly as he unzipped it. It felt wrong, like betrayal, but some betrayals are quieter than others. Some sneak up behind you wearing your wife's perfume. Inside, folded neatly, was a hotel receipt. The date was last Thursday. The same Thursday she had told him her team was pulling an all-nighter. It was for a room at the Rivergate Hotel, a place known less for business and more for its skyline-viewed jacuzzis and discreet check-ins. He stared at it for a long time. A very long time. The room number was 1908. Jessica emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, humming something soft, her face still flushed from the heat. She didn't notice the receipt on the kitchen table until the following morning. Daniel said nothing. He didn't need to. She saw the way he looked at her now, like she was a question he was too tired to ask. Her hands trembled as she poured the coffee. Silence filled the room like smoke. Thick, choking, invisible, but inescapable. And yet, Jessica didn't explain. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe the story of how a woman falls isn't told in a scream, but in 1,000 quiet steps. A hand that lingers too long. A compliment from the wrong person. A moment of weakness. A door that should never have been opened. Jessica had always laughed at scandals. Now, she carried one in her purse. It started with a conversation. Harmless, she told herself. Jessica had stayed behind after a quarterly review meeting, half expecting Richard Hayes to brush past her with a nod and nothing more. Instead, he lingered, the way he always did when the office was just quiet enough for suggestion to thrive. "You're wasting your potential," he said, leaning against the edge of the conference table with practiced ease. "You're sharp, organized, but you don't sell yourself. That's your flaw." Jessica had blinked. "I thought the work was supposed to speak for itself." Richard had smiled. Slow, measured, a man used to being agreed with. "That's cute, but naive. In this world, work only talks if someone powerful gives it a microphone." That was the beginning. She didn't want to admit how the flattery made her feel. Seen, special, chosen, after years of being just efficient, just reliable, suddenly she was exceptional in someone's eyes. She told Daniel about the conversation that night. Keeping it casual, left out the tone, left out the pause, left out how Richard had let his gaze rest too long on the line of her jaw. A week later came the dinner invite. Strictly professional, the text had read. She had hesitated, then justified. Connections matter. He is the boss. After all, the restaurant was expensive. He ordered wine without asking. They didn't talk about projects. They talked about ambition, about pressure, about how hard it is to be taken seriously as a woman in finance. He said all the right things. She heard all the wrong ones. The hotel came later. One mistake, that's what she told herself. A lapse, an impulse, an accident dressed in candlelight and vulnerability. Richard had a way of making sin feel strategic. When she woke up beside him the next morning, she wanted to cry. Instead, she smiled, brushed her hair in the mirror, and promised herself it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Richard knew exactly which strings to pull. He made her feel needed. He whispered about her untapped potential, about promotions being slow because some board members were old school and didn't like assertive women. "Let me help you cut through the noise," he said once, his mouth near her ear, his hand brushing the curve of her waist. And she let him. Jessica began to compartmentalize. The Jessica at work was focused, efficient, rising fast. The Jessica at night was someone else. Someone she barely recognized. Someone who wore lipstick darker than usual, heels a bit too high, and always packed an overnight bag, just in case. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. The nights away, the detachment, her sudden fascination with privacy. But he said nothing. Jessica began to live on the edge of truth, hoping silence could patch what honesty would destroy. Then came the shift. Richard started to make demands. Small at first. Stay a little longer. Wear the red dress. Don't make me wait. Then bigger ones. He wanted her always available. Always responsive. He made her cancel meetings. Miss birthdays. She began to feel less like a person and more like an accessory to his ego. It wasn't passion anymore. It was management. She tried to pull away. Made excuses. Delayed responses. But Richard wasn't a man used to hearing no. One night, she met him in a hotel room out of obligation. She told him it had to stop. He laughed. "You think you get to walk away now? Sweetheart, I built your momentum. You think those accounts landed on your desk by accident?" Jessica stood frozen, blood rushing to her ears. "Are you saying it was all conditional?" He shrugged. "I'm saying you'd be surprised how fragile reputations are, especially when they're caught on video." Something inside her cracked. She scanned the room. It looked the same as always. Tasteful, impersonal, clean, and yet, something felt off. Her eyes landed on the smoke detector, then the corner lamp, then the mirror across from the bed. Her hands shook as she approached it. Gently, she traced the edge of the frame. There, almost invisible, was the lens. She stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. "You recorded me." Richard didn't deny it, didn't confirm, he simply smiled, cold and calm. "Let's just say, I believe in insurance." Jessica left in silence. Her mind spiraled. Rage, fear, shame. She went home and threw up in the bathroom while Daniel slept down the hall. She considered telling him, but where would she even begin? Days passed. Richard didn't contact her. She thought maybe he was bluffing. Then it happened. An email, no sender, no subject, just a video attachment. It was short, 22 seconds. Enough. She recognized the hotel bedspread. The sound of her own voice. Breathless. Her face. Then came the whispers at work. The glances. The silence when she walked into a room. No one said it outright. But she knew, someone had seen it, probably more than one. And then, Daniel. He came home early one afternoon, stood in the doorway of their kitchen, and held out his phone without a word. The same video. Jessica stared at the screen. Her knees buckled. "Is it real?" Daniel asked, his voice hollow. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The truth was raw now, exposed, unavoidable, and Richard Hayes, polished and untouchable, kept smiling from his glass tower, while Jessica crumbled below. Daniel didn't remember sitting down. One moment, he was standing in the kitchen with Jessica's phone in his hand. The video still paused mid-frame. The next, he was on the floor, knees to his chest, the cold tiles pressing against his skin, shaking. The world had become silent. Not quiet, but mute, as if sound itself had been wrung out of the air. Jessica stood a few feet away, frozen, her lips parted, breath shallow. She looked like she was about to speak, but didn't. What words could be spoken when the image of your betrayal was playing on loop inside your husband's skull? Daniel had always thought heartbreak would come like thunder, a crack, a scream, something loud and final. But this was a slow implosion. He could feel himself folding inward. He smashed the phone, not hers, his, threw it against the wall with such force the screen shattered into a constellation of regret. Jessica flinched at the sound, hands instinctively rising to shield her face. Then came the sobbing, not hers, his. He wept like a man who didn't know how to scream, curled in on himself, palms over his eyes, shoulders trembling. Jessica took a step forward, then stopped, another, then fell to her knees beside him. "Daniel, please, Her voice cracked. He didn't look at her. "I need you to listen. It wasn't love. It wasn't even, don't," he whispered. She touched his arm. He jerked it away. "It was for the job. He said he could help me. I was stuck, invisible, and he noticed me. I didn't mean for it to happen." Daniel finally looked at her. Eyes red, jaw clenched. "And you thought I wouldn't help you? You thought I wasn't enough?" Jessica shook her head, tears falling now. "It wasn't about you. That's the worst part," he snapped. "That you could throw away everything we built. And not even think of me. Not even once." She tried to reach for him again. He stood up abruptly, walked away, into the bedroom, into silence. The days that followed were not days. They were fragments, unspoken meals, doors closed softly, avoided gazes. Jessica slept on the couch. Barely slept at all. At work, it was worse. She felt the atmosphere shift the moment she stepped into the office. Conversations stopped when she passed. Emails dried up. People who once smiled now pretended not to see her. She told herself it was paranoia, until she walked into the women's restroom and saw it. A printout, pinned to the stall door. A still from the video. Her, mid-motion, eyes half closed, vulnerable, branded. She tore it down. Her hands shook so hard she couldn't rip it cleanly. She looked around, but no one was there. Or maybe they were, hiding behind silence. That afternoon, she was called into hour. No direct accusations, just questions. Do you feel safe here? Jessica, is there any conflict of interest you haven't disclosed? She answered with as little breath as possible. She knew what they were doing. Paper trails, covering bases, positioning themselves. She went back to her desk, only to find a post-it stuck to her monitor. Whore, in neat handwriting, feminine. Jessica sat down and stared at it for a long time, then slowly peeled it off and folded it, as if it was something delicate. She couldn't work, couldn't focus, couldn't breathe. She stared out the window for hours, watching people walk past on the street below, all of them untouched, unaware, free. At night, Daniel said nothing. He had moved into the guest room. The hallway between them had grown into a chasm. Once, she stood outside his door, listening to the soft sound of him breathing. She wanted to knock, to cry, to beg. She walked away instead. She didn't know who she was anymore. A career woman, a traitor, a pawn. She had made a choice, and then 1,000 more to protect it, until the lie became heavier than the truth. And now the truth was all that remained. Jessica had not simply lost her husband. She had lost her reflection, her reputation, her name, and there was no one left to blame but herself. The suspension email came on a Monday morning. No subject line, just a line of text, effective immediately. You are placed on administrative leave pending further internal review. Jessica sat at her desk, staring at the screen as if the words might rearrange themselves. She didn't cry. There was no panic, only numbness, like a sedative injected directly into her bloodstream. Her badge was deactivated by noon. They didn't escort her out. That would have been too obvious. Instead, her login expired mid-click, and her Outlook locked itself with a hollow beep. She packed her things in silence. No one looked up, no one said goodbye, not even Karen from accounting, who used to ask about her weekend. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral procession no one bothered to attend. That night, Daniel didn't come home. A note lay on the kitchen counter. Short, mechanical, staying at Mark's, papers coming soon. The divorce papers arrived on Friday. She didn't open them right away. She placed the envelope on the nightstand, next to a picture of their honeymoon in Oregon. Two smiling strangers who didn't know what lay ahead. When she finally opened it, she only scanned the lines. Property division, no contest, mutual agreement, no children, no pets, no reason to fight. She called her mother that weekend. No answer. Tried again, straight to voicemail. Her sister unfollowed her on Instagram. Her college roommate left a comment on one of her old photos. I thought you were better than this. Jessica stopped scrolling. She stopped everything. The job search was next. She cleaned up her resume, wrote new cover letters, created a new Gmail. She Googled herself to check what a recruiter might see. And there it was. Not the video itself, that had been taken down, but the screenshots, the forums, the whispers. Her name was everywhere. Threads titled with words like, office slut, boss's toy, HR nightmare. One site had a thread entirely dedicated to her. Men ranking her body, breaking down her performance, laughing in digital echo chambers. She closed the laptop, vomited into the kitchen sink. One company replied to her application, a mid-level consulting firm in Milwaukee. The interviews started well. The HR manager, a woman in her 50s, seemed kind, until her eyes flicked toward the screen. Then her posture changed, polite, distant. We'll be in touch, she said, and Jessica never heard from him again. She filed a formal complaint against Richard, collected every email, every calendar invite, every vague promise he made, attached a personal statement detailing the coercion, the hidden camera, the fallout. 3 weeks later, the response came back, insufficient evidence to prove non-consensual misconduct. That was the language. Insufficient. She was insufficient. Richard, meanwhile, appeared in a company-wide email congratulating him on securing a new international client. His headshot beamed across the newsletter. Still crisp, still smug. Jessica didn't scream. She didn't break anything. She wrote, in a leather-bound notebook she'd bought years ago but never used. She began documenting everything, not just the events, But the feelings, the erosion, the disconnection from her own skin. She wrote until her fingers cramped, until her back ached from leaning over the table, until the words felt like air leaving her lungs. Each night, she returned to the journal. Ritual, confession, final anchor. She didn't go out, she didn't turn on the TV. The apartment became a tomb of memory, filled with shadows of laughter and pasta sauce on the walls. On the last page, she wrote, "There is nothing left, not career, not love, not name. Everyone walked away, and I can't blame them. Who would stay for a woman who traded her soul for a promotion and lost both?" And finally, underlined twice, "I have nothing to lose. No one believes me, no one stayed." She closed the book and placed it neatly on the table, folded her hands. The city lights blinked outside her window. Indifferent. Somewhere high above, Richard Hayes finished his scotch in a glass-walled office, and smiled at a future he had stolen. Jessica sat alone, but at least, now, she had written the truth. They found her on a Tuesday. It was the building manager who called it in. The rent hadn't been paid, and the smell had started to seep into the hallway. No one answered the knocks. No one had seen her in over a week. Inside the apartment, the lights were off, the curtains drawn. The only sound came from a clock ticking somewhere in the kitchen. Indifferent and eternal, Jessica was on the couch. The leather-bound journal lay on the coffee table, open to the last page. Next to it, a glass still half full of water, untouched. Her expression was calm, not peaceful, not content, just still, a kind of stillness that spoke of finality. The coroner called it suicide, a combination of prescription drugs and alcohol. The note was the journal itself. The funeral was quiet. It rained. Daniel stood at the edge of the small crowd, if one could call 5 people a crowd, his coat soaked through, his hands wrapped tightly around the worn leather of Jessica's journal. He had read it cover to cover, once, twice, and again, every sentence carved into his chest like a blade. She had never stopped loving him. That much was clear between the lines. But she had hated herself more than she could ever ask him to forgive. Daniel hadn't known how deep she had fallen, hadn't seen the silence as a scream, hadn't understood that her detachment wasn't distance, but drowning. He was the last to leave. The last to look at the coffin before it was lowered. The last to whisper goodbye. Across the city, Richard Hayes was in a conference room, shaking hands with a client from Singapore, closing another deal. His suit was pressed, his smile sharp. No one mentioned Jessica. Her name had been scrubbed clean from the company's records. Her desk reassigned within a week of her leave. But the silence didn't last forever. Almost exactly 1 year later, a woman named Lena Ford, a junior analyst fresh out of grad school, walked into HR with a flash drive and a trembling voice. Her story was nearly identical. Coercion, manipulation, promises, a camera. But this time, there was proof. Audio, video, emails. And when it broke wide. Lawsuits followed. 4 women came forward, then 5, then 10. Richard Hayes resigned in disgrace. His severance package stripped. His legacy turned to ash. He was sued, investigated, publicly condemned. But by then, it was too late to matter. Too late for Jessica. Daniel watched the headlines with a hollow ache. The world was outraged now. The same world that ignored Jessica, dismissed her, blamed her. Now they were sorry. Now they believed. He didn't speak to reporters, didn't join the lawsuits, but he did one thing. He gave the journal to a podcast. Not a big one, just a quiet, honest show run by a woman who cared more about truth than ratings. The host read excerpts on air, softly, respectfully. The final episode ended with Daniel's voice. Steady, barely. She wrote, "Everyone has a price. I sold my soul to buy an empty chair." Then silence. The kind that demands reflection. The kind Jessica had lived in for too long. Outro. An affair might last only a few nights, but its consequences can echo through a lifetime. You might forget the person who made you laugh, but you will never forget the one who made you lose your trust. Rachel always believed that the role of HR was to enforce boundaries. Quietly, consistently, and without ego, she had built her reputation over 2 decades on discretion and discipline. Carving out her authority not through intimidation, but through the meticulous calm of someone who knew how to clean up other people's messes. But she had no idea how messy her own would become. Rachel Holloway, the gatekeeper of workplace ethics. That's how one of the interns had jokingly introduced her during orientation the year before. She had smiled, a tight-lipped curve of professionalism, and added, "Ethics are everyone's job, I'm just the one who keeps the receipts." At 42, Rachel was proud of her position. Director of Human Resources at Lintel Systems, a mid-sized but high-profile tech firm in San Diego. Her office had a view of the harbor. Her emails were crisp, her wardrobe neutral and sharp. Nothing flashy, she didn't need flair, her presence was enough. She lived with Martin, her husband of 14 years, a software engineer with gentle eyes and quiet hands. They had met at a tech conference in Portland and never looked back. Martin cooked, Rachel scheduled, he handled the morning, she managed the night. They didn't fight often, they didn't need to, their lives ran parallel like train tracks, functional, aligned, unbothered, or so Martin thought. Lately, Rachel had been getting home later. Not just 15 minutes, hours. She always had a reason. Back-to-back exit interviews, new day initiatives, a last-minute crisis with payroll. The kinds of things that only she could handle. Or so she implied. Martin didn't push. He had always admired her devotion to her work. But there was something else. Rachel had started showering as soon as she got home. She used to change and pour herself a glass of wine while debriefing her day. Now she disappeared into the bathroom without a word. She no longer left her phone face up on the kitchen island. In fact, she no longer left it anywhere. It remained glued to her side. Screen dark, notifications off. One night, Martin walked past her office at home and saw her staring at her phone. Smiling in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. That soft, playful expression, like she was 16 again. When she noticed him, her face went flat so quickly it startled him. "Everything okay?" he asked, keeping his tone light. She nodded. "Just work." He believed her, or rather, he needed to. Rachel wasn't cold. She still kissed him goodbye in the mornings. Still remembered to buy his favorite cereal. But there was a current beneath her that he couldn't reach anymore. As if she was walking through their life with a part of her somewhere else. He started to notice how often she deleted her texts. How she smiled at incoming calls but never answered them in front of him. How she locked the bathroom door now, even when just brushing her teeth. Martin didn't confront her. He wasn't the kind of man who leapt to suspicion. He was the kind who waited, hoping the truth would come around without being chased. And then, one evening, he found the pin. Rachel had been in a rush that morning. Left her coat draped on the armrest of the couch. Martin was looking for his keys when his hand brushed against something small and sharp in the pocket. He pulled it out. It was a silver lapel pin. A small enamel lightning bolt. Stylish, but not Rachel's style, and definitely not hers. He turned it over in his palm. No initials, no tag, just an accessory, but it didn't belong. Rachel didn't wear pins. She hated them, said they snagged on her scarves. Martin sat down, pin in hand, heart beating slowly but loudly. Something settled in his chest then. Heavy, unnamed, not quite betrayal, not yet. When Rachel came home that night, she was tired, her eyes shadowed by something more than exhaustion. She smiled at him the way someone smiles at a picture of themselves from before everything changed. Martin said nothing. He didn't ask about the pin, didn't mention the late nights, just nodded when she said she was skipping dinner and going to bed early. And then he watched her walk away. It was in that moment he realized the woman he loved was standing in front of him. But the life they had built was already halfway behind them, and she had crossed a line she once taught others never to approach. It started with a joke. Tyler had been in the building for 3 days when he made Rachel laugh. Really laugh. She had been walking past the intern row, clipboard in hand, when he called after her in a faux serious tone. "Hey, Director Holloway, what's the HR-approved number of coffees I can drink before I'm legally considered a liability?" She turned, smirked. 6. After that, you owe the company a keyboard. It was harmless, that's what she told herself. Tyler was young, 24, fresh out of UC Berkeley. He had a quick smile, a head full of ambition, and a charm that seemed to rise off him like cologne. He wasn't just eager, he was magnetic. People liked him immediately. He had a gift for making others feel seen. Rachel didn't remember when the first message arrived. Maybe it was after that all-staff happy hour. Maybe it was the night she stayed late and he brought her a coffee just the way she liked it. Extra hot, oat milk, no sugar. It wasn't flirtatious, not at first, just warm, grateful. "Thanks for not making the HR talk awkward." She responded, "Thanks for staying awake during it." They laughed. Then they kept talking. DMs turned into texts. Emojis. Inside jokes. Compliments hidden between lines of sarcasm. A photo of her desk strewn with paperwork. A photo of his shoes propped on a conference room chair. Captioned, "Thinking like a VP already." She told herself she was mentoring him. That it was nice to feel admired. Relevant. The first touch was accidental. Fingers brushing while reaching for the same file. The second wasn't, a hand resting on her lower back as he leaned close during a meeting. She should have said something. Instead, she smiled. She didn't know when they became something else. The hotel room was neutral territory. Clean, beige walls, quiet, the kind of place people disappear in without leaving a trace. Tyler made it feel like something out of a secret novel. He called her Rach, whispered things that made her knees weak, held her like she was fragile and powerful all at once. They met 3 times, then 4. Each time, she told herself it would be the last. Then came the messages she didn't answer fast enough. "Are you ignoring me? We had a good thing. You're just going to ghost me? You think I don't have things saved?" Her stomach twisted. She tried to pull away gently. Claimed stress, workload, home tension. Tyler didn't back off. "I'm not your secret, Rachel, and if I'm not good enough to be in your life, maybe I should be in someone else's inbox." There were photos, clips, his hand on her thigh, her voice in the dark, the unmistakable rhythm of their moments. He sent her one, just a few seconds long. No face, but enough. Accidents happen. He texted. Projectors get hijacked. Emails get misrouted. Rachel panicked. She blocked his number, reported him anonymously to IT for suspicious network behavior, a weak move. She knew. She debated confessing to Martin, to her boss, to legal, but the idea of standing in front of them, peeling off her mask, admitting what she had done, it felt impossible. She went silent instead. She buried it. But secrets rot. 2 weeks later, during the Q3 all-hands meeting, she took her usual seat near the front. Tyler was nowhere in sight. Good. The lights dimmed. The projector hummed to life. The first slide should have been about retention rates. Instead, it was them. Rachel, half naked, her breath caught mid-laugh. A still frame from one of the videos. Muted, but unmistakable. Gasps. A chair scraped. Someone dropped their coffee. Her heart exploded in her chest. She stood, tried to move toward the screen. But it cut to black. Then silence. And phones. Dozens of them, raised, recording, archiving, sharing. Rachel did not speak. She walked out, one foot in front of the other, like a woman on a rope bridge that had just started to burn. The room was cold, not physically, the temperature was fine, but something about the air inside the boardroom made Rachel feel like her blood had dropped 10 degrees. 3 men and 1 woman sat across from her, their expressions tight, professional, the company's COO, the general counsel, the head of security, and the senior VP of communications. They weren't angry, that might have been easier. They looked like people preparing to witness a car crash they couldn't stop. "Rachel," the COO began, voice level, "we need to give you the opportunity to share your version of what happened." She opened her mouth. No sound came out. The words were there, somewhere, floating just out of reach. But her throat had closed around them like a trapdoor. What version? The one where she had been seduced? The one where she had been reckless? The one where she had simply been so tired of being invisible? So desperate to feel alive that she let herself fall? She swallowed hard, looked at the glass of water in front of her but didn't touch it. "I made a mistake," she said finally. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. No one reacted. They just kept nodding, jotting down notes. "We're putting you on leave until we complete our internal investigation," the General Counsel said. "Effective immediately," added the VP of Comms, her eyes soft with something that might have been pity. Rachel signed the papers with fingers that barely moved. When she got home, the lights were off. Martin was already there, sitting at the kitchen table, a manila envelope in front of him. He didn't stand when she walked in, didn't speak. She placed her bag on the counter. Slowly, carefully, like every movement might shatter something invisible. "Martin," she whispered. He looked up. His face wasn't angry, it was blank. "You're the one who lectures people on boundaries," he said. "You've built your whole career on drawing lines for others. What happened to yours?" Rachel took a step toward him, and he stood abruptly. "Don't," he said. "Please." She froze. Then the shouting started. Not from him, from her. She told him she had made a mistake, that it had gotten out of hand, that she had tried to end it, that she didn't know what else to do. He didn't say a word. He just picked up the envelope, tucked it under his arm, and walked out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't look back. At work, things unraveled quickly. By Wednesday, someone had printed screenshots from the video and taped them to the mirror in the women's restroom. By Friday, there was a Twitter account posting memes with her face Photoshop onto degrading images, followed by dozens of coworkers. No one said anything to her directly, but when she entered a room, conversations died. Eyes lingered, some with disgust, some with thrill. The silence was worse than any insult. She tried to speak to HR, her former domain. The woman now filling her role avoided eye contact and suggested Rachel take some time away from the office. Rachel sat in her car in the company parking lot the next morning. Engine off, keys in her lap. Her hands were shaking. She looked out across the sea of windshields and wondered how many of them had seen it. How many had forwarded it? How many had saved it? She started crying. Not small, delicate tears, but the kind that came from the stomach. That gutted, that broke. She screamed, once, then twice, punched the steering wheel. Her wedding ring cut her knuckle. The car filled with her sobs. She didn't go inside. She drove away, because this wasn't about an affair anymore. This was execution by humiliation. This was character death by committee. She was no longer Rachel Holloway, HR director. She was the scandal, the punchline, the woman who got caught. The termination letter arrived by courier. A single page, unsigned, with the company logo at the top and a line that split her life in two. This termination is based on a breach of the company's ethical code and the reputational harm incurred. Rachel sat on the edge of her bed with the letter in her lap, still sealed in its envelope, her hands motionless. She'd known it was coming, but knowledge does little to blunt the violence of confirmation. She didn't cry, not immediately. Instead, she stood, opened her closet, and began folding the clothes she once wore to command rooms. Blazers, pencil skirts, neutral heels, the uniform of authority. She placed them all in a box she wouldn't label. That night, Martin returned, just long enough to leave a white envelope on the counter. She waited until the door clicked shut before opening it. No documents, just a letter. "You didn't just betray me, Rachel. You betrayed the version of you I fought to believe in. The one who stood taller than the rest. The one who always knew the rules, not just enforced them." It was signed with his full name. Not M. Not Love Martin. Just Martin Holloway, as if he were filing an exit interview. She sat on the floor and read it again. And again, each word punctured her differently. The calls stopped coming, then the texts. Her contacts list shrank without deletion. Old colleagues removed her from group chats. 2 of them blocked her entirely. On a forum for women in HR leadership, someone had anonymously posted a thread. An HR director at a known tech firm was recently involved in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. The fallout was ugly. Let this be a lesson. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. She didn't need to scroll to know who they meant. Her LinkedIn inbox filled with recruiters, until the story spread. Then it filled with silence. A silence that said, "We Googled you. We saw. Thank you, but no." She attended interviews anyway, sat across from men and women who smiled politely and asked the usual questions. But the moment they glanced down at her name, something changed. A flicker in the eye. A forced clearing of the throat. One interviewer, young, overly rehearsed, asked, "How do you handle ethical breaches in teams?" She didn't answer, just packed her bag, stood, and left. Late one night, unable to sleep, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and pen. She thought she was going to write a plan, a way forward, a checklist. Instead, she wrote a letter, addressed to Tyler. She would never send it. That wasn't the point. "Dear Tyler, I thought I was the one in control. I thought experience outweighed youth. Power outweighed charm. But all I had were rules, and you never played by them. You knew what I stood to lose. And you were never afraid of making me lose it. Maybe that was the game for you. I thought I was pulling the strings. Turns out, I was the marionette, a middle-aged pawn in your performance of rebellion. This wasn't love. It wasn't even lust. It was exposure. I thought I had power. But I was just the easiest one to burn." She signed it with no name. Then folded it twice and placed it under a candle. Not to burn, just to bury. Because some things are not written to be seen. Some things are written to stop them from echoing in the dark. Rachel left the city with no announcement. No goodbye post. No new beginning speech. She simply disappeared into a smaller life. Slipping into a town 2 hours north where no one knew her name, and the silence came without judgment. Her new apartment was the top floor of a weathered duplex. It smelled like old wood and soap. The landlord didn't ask questions. The neighbors nodded but never lingered. She liked it that way. There was peace in anonymity. She worked part-time at a small office supply store. No titles, no deadlines, just shelves to stock and orders to file. Some days she didn't speak to more than 3 people. Those were the days she preferred. She no longer wore the sharp lines of a power suit. She wore sweaters, soft jeans, shoes with thick soles. She cooked, read. Sometimes she walked for miles without direction. Her phone rarely rang. 3 years passed. She learned Martin had remarried through a photo someone tagged on social media. A beach wedding, a woman in blue. Rachel stared at the image longer than she meant to. He looked happy, truly happy. She didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because some pain ages out of tears. Then came the letter. It was official, from a district court in another state. Tyler James Calloway had been arrested. Charges: blackmail, coercion, and the unlawful recording of a sexual act without consent. The victim was a young analyst at a media firm, but they wanted Rachel as a corroborating witness. The prosecutor had found her letter, submitted during a previous civil complaint. She was the pattern, the first, if not the only. She said yes. When she took the stand, the courtroom was quiet. Tyler didn't meet her eyes. He looked smaller than she remembered. Not younger, just diminished. Like a person who had finally run out of script. Rachel answered each question with precision. No tremble, no theatrics, just fact. The judge listened. The jury took notes. And somewhere between the second and third question, Rachel realized she wasn't afraid. She had already survived the worst thing. When it was over, she stepped outside, blinking into the light. The world hadn't changed. Cars still honked. People still moved past without noticing her. But she had changed. A reporter caught her at the sidewalk. "Do you regret having the affair?" Rachel paused. "No," she said. "I regret not ending it sooner. When I still had someone worth apologizing to." She turned and walked away. the weight of old mistakes no longer clinging to her shoulders but folded. Finally, into the past. Outro. Infidelity might start in secret, but it ends in front of everyone. Some affairs burn fast, others burn everything around them. You might forgive, you might forget, but trust never comes back whole. Amanda built brands for a living. She knew how to control a narrative, how to take a broken story and reshape it into something believable, even beautiful. But no amount of brand strategy could prepare her for the moment when someone else wrote her downfall in high definition. Behind the closed door of a hotel suite. At 38, Amanda Rayner was the kind of woman who carried herself like a verdict. Sharp heels, tighter deadlines. She ran the marketing department at one of Austin's rising creative agencies. And in a city where youth often trumped experience, she made herself irreplaceable by being the kind of leader who never stumbled. At least not where anyone could see. She lived alone by choice. A condo in East Austin. Clean, angular furniture, no plants, no pets, just space for work and quiet. Her personal life was a blank canvas, and that was how she liked it. To colleagues, Amanda was confident, precise, and untouchable. She was never the one laughing too loud at the office happy hour. She didn't confide, didn't complain, didn't date within the firm. Her rules. And then came Jacob. Jacob Myers was 29, married, and new, fresh out of a top-tier MBA program. He was brought on as Amanda's assistant to help manage the growing demands of the client portfolio. His resume was clean, his energy contagious, and his presence subtly disruptive. He had a way of smiling just a second longer than expected. His compliments were always about more than the project, the way Amanda handled pressure. The way she made a decision seem like gravity. He noticed things. Too many things. Amanda wasn't naive. She saw it, but she told herself it was harmless. An admiration she could control. A boost, maybe, during a long stretch of stressful deadlines and longer nights. He stayed late often. She let him. Their office chats grew longer. Her smiles grew more frequent. Just a little longer than they used to be. Outside the office, Amanda began checking her phone more often. She started bringing it to bed. Something she never used to do. She muted notifications but checked him anyway. And when she did, she always held the screen toward her chest. The digital intimacy deepened. Quietly. Emojis that lingered. Inside jokes that no one else would understand. Messages that started with, "Hey, this might be totally inappropriate but..." She laughed at first. Then she replied. Jacob was married. Amanda had met Naomi once at a company picnic, a kind woman. Quiet but warm, a schoolteacher. Amanda remembered thinking, with some irony, that Naomi and Jacob looked like a stock photo couple. Too perfect, too staged. But none of that mattered in the quiet moments after midnight. When Amanda found herself scrolling back through old messages, reading them twice, smiling at them, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, wanted. Naomi, for her part, noticed the changes too. Jacob had started coming home later. His excuses were thin. Pitch decks. Launch reviews. Amanda needed another set of eyes. He stopped initiating conversation, started leaving his phone face down on the nightstand. Then one Saturday afternoon, while doing laundry, Naomi found a hotel receipt in the pocket of Jacob's jeans. The date caught her attention immediately. Thursday night, the same night Jacob said he stayed late for strategy alignment. The same night Amanda had emailed the team saying she wouldn't be reachable past 9 p.m. due to a leadership dinner. Naomi didn't confront him right away. She put the receipt in her wallet. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed calm. Amanda, that evening, was sitting on her patio sipping wine and texting Jacob something that made them both laugh. Her face was lit by the soft glow of her phone screen. The wine helped blur the edges of guilt. She knew she was stepping over lines. But the line had been so faint, and the darkness made it easy to pretend it wasn't there at all. She didn't know that her narrative was already unraveling. That somewhere, not far away, Naomi was beginning to trace the first thread. And Amanda, the woman who controlled every headline, Didn't realize the next one would be written without her permission. Naomi didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply watched. From across the street, tucked in the shadow of a lamppost, Naomi stood on the edge of a Thursday night and captured her husband stepping through the glass doors of the Avalon Hotel. 10 minutes later, Amanda arrived. Black blazer, red lipstick, confident stride. She didn't even look around. Naomi recorded everything. The way Jacob pressed the elevator button without hesitation. The way Amanda followed. The moment the doors slid shut. The flicker of lights in a window 13 stories up. She caught it all on camera. Even the sound of laughter that spilled into the hallway when the door briefly reopened. She didn't go inside. She didn't confront. Naomi was a schoolteacher. Patience and restraint were her weapons. She went home, sat at the kitchen table, and replayed the footage, not to torture herself, but to confirm, to be certain that the betrayal was real and not just imagined shadows. Amanda, the next day, walked into the office like any other Friday. Coffee in hand, poised. Her team greeted her with smiles. Deadlines loomed, but her mind was elsewhere. On a text Jacob had sent just after 2 a.m. a heart emoji. And one word, perfect. She smiled at that. She had no idea what was coming. At precisely 10:43 a.m., the glass doors of the agency burst open. Naomi entered, flanked by 2 women, friends, witnesses. Each held a manila folder. The lobby fell silent. Amanda stepped out of her office. Brows furrowed. Then Naomi threw the first photo. A freeze frame from the video. Jacob's hand on Amanda's back. Another photo followed. Amanda laughing in a hallway mirror. Then another. A close-up of their hands intertwined over a wine glass. "This," Naomi said, loud and even, "is the woman sleeping with my husband. This is who represents your brand." Gasps. Phones raised. Someone started recording. A live stream began. Amanda froze. For a moment, her instincts told her to deny. To fix. But there was nothing to fix. The truth was no longer a whisper. It was an explosion. Jacob was nowhere to be seen. He had slipped out earlier that morning, not returning messages. Amanda hadn't noticed his absence until now. One of the interns laughed awkwardly. Another covered her mouth. The junior designer in the back of the room stepped away from her laptop and just stared. No one moved to defend Amanda. No one spoke. The head of HR came down from the mezzanine level. Eyes wide, she asked Naomi to leave. But Naomi, with one last folder, dropped a final set of images on the floor in front of Amanda's feet. Then she walked out, slow and steady. Amanda stood alone. The air felt thinner. The room felt colder. Her hands shook, not from guilt, but from being exposed so completely. She turned to return to her office. But the silence followed her like a shadow. The judgment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was in the eyes. The posture. The averted gazes. The way no one dared whisper her name. Amanda closed the door behind her and leaned against it. Heart pounding. She looked down at the scattered photos. Then at her own reflection in the darkened window. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The strategist. The perfectionist. The one who always had control. Now, not even her own name felt like hers anymore. Amanda sat across from the director of our. Hands folded. Face numb. The room was sterile, its silence only broken by the occasional hum of the air conditioner. There were no accusations, no need. The woman behind the desk simply asked, "Is there anything you'd like to disclose before we proceed with internal actions?" It wasn't a question, it was a formality. Amanda opened her mouth, closed it. She wanted to say Jacob's name, to explain how it wasn't supposed to happen, how the lines had blurred. But what did it matter now? The photos were out. The story had already been written in group chats and Slack threads. Anything she said now would be a postscript, a footnote to a scandal everyone had already made their minds up about. Jacob never came back to the office. The moment Naomi dropped the evidence in front of the entire staff. He vanished, deleted his work accounts, cleaned out his desk after hours, and disappeared. His silence said more than any denial could have. Amanda became the lead character in every whispered conversation. Screenshots circulated. Memes were made. One coworker used a still from the video as a reaction GIF in a private chat, only for it to accidentally leak. No one apologized. They just waited for her to break. One evening, Amanda sat on the cold hardwood floor of her apartment, an open bottle of whiskey beside her, mascara smudged and laptop screen glowing with unread emails. She shouted to no one, her voice raw. "Why him? Why did I pick someone who couldn't even protect me?" Her words echoed back, hollow and uncomforting. Jacob had been the thrill, the deviation, but when the walls closed in, he left her alone to face the firing squad. Meanwhile, Naomi filed for divorce. Her message was short, just a forwarded court document and a note, "Don't contact me again." Jacob, according to rumors, had moved back in with his mother. A few claimed he was looking for jobs out of state. Others speculated he was in therapy. Amanda didn't care. She couldn't afford to care. Survival had shrunk her world to minutes, to hours, to just getting through the next breath without collapsing. She continued showing up to work for a few days, sitting in meetings where no one made eye contact. Emails went unanswered. Tasks were reassigned without her knowledge. People smiled too politely or too tightly. Then, on a Tuesday morning, Amanda stood in front of the elevator, badge in hand. Her reflection stared back from the brushed steel. Pale, exhausted, someone she didn't recognize. She turned away, walked out the lobby, and never came back. Amanda's official termination letter arrived via email at 7:06 a.m. The subject line was sterile, almost apologetic, "Termination of employment, Amanda Rayner." She didn't open it right away. She didn't need to. The reason was clear: personal conduct causing severe reputational harm to the brand. She stared at the screen in silence, coffee cooling beside her. Her apartment was still, too still. It was the kind of silence that didn't soothe but scraped. Her thumb hovered over the email, then drifted away. Amanda had always been precise, deliberate, but now, nothing about her life followed the rhythm she once controlled. Her mind played the words she hadn't yet read, over and over. Her phone lit up with a LinkedIn alert, another job post from an agency she'd once presented for. A top 5 pitch. She remembered the thrill of standing in front of their boardroom, her voice confident, her story airtight. They applauded. Now, she clicked, apply, but when she typed her name into the field, she paused. Amanda Rayner. 2 weeks ago, it had weight. Now, it was radioactive. She tried changing her hairstyle, removed all traces of her past company on her resume, spent hours rewriting cover letters. But the result never changed. Every interview started the same, polite smiles, small talk, and ended with eyes that said, "We know." No one brought up the video. They didn't need to. The air shifted when they read her name. It had become a trigger word, tied to betrayal, scandal, and something worse, moral failure. The video Naomi released had taken on a second life. It was shared in WhatsApp groups, Reddit forums, Slack channels. It was now featured in an exposé by a media collective advocating against workplace affairs. Amanda's face was blurred but still recognizable. They quoted her old tweets on ethics and branding, played a montage of her conference speeches, then cut to the footage outside the office when Naomi stormed in. The narration was surgical: a senior executive, a married subordinate, a reputation undone in one afternoon. The word example kept surfacing. She had become an example, a living warning. Her name was listed on HR discussion boards as a case study. People she had trained, mentored, laughed with, none reached out. Some even unfriended her online. Group chats she was once central to fell silent. She watched as her world unraveled from the inside out. Thread by thread, Amanda tried to reach out. She left messages with old colleagues, even former bosses, polite apologies, long explanations, radio silence. One person finally replied, a woman she'd shared late nights and client deadlines with, "You broke every rule we built." Amanda stared at that message for a long time, then deleted the thread. She had no defense, not anymore. Sleep evaded her, even when sedatives dulled the edge. Her dreams betrayed her. She dreamed of Naomi's face, of Jacob's hands pulling away, of a boardroom full of people turning their backs. She stopped eating regularly. Her fridge was nearly empty. Dust-coated unopened meal kits. The plants by her window sagged. The silence in the apartment became a second skin. Not oppressive, but familiar. One afternoon, she watched an old video of herself delivering a TEDx talk on narrative power in the digital age. Her voice was strong, her smile magnetic. She had believed every word. She looked like someone who had never doubted herself, someone who would never fall. She laughed, not out of humor. Something cracked in her throat and it came out like a cough dressed as a giggle. That night, sitting on the edge of her bed, Amanda opened a fresh page in her journal. Her pen trembled, not from fear, from sheer depletion. She wrote one line: "I used to teach people how to build brands. Now my name is a brand of shame." Then she closed the notebook and turned off the light, not out of hope, but out of muscle memory. Amanda left Austin 2 weeks after her lease expired. No farewell party, no announcement, just a quiet departure with a few suitcases and a muted forwarding address. She found herself in a lakeside town in Michigan, where the fog came early and lingered, where neighbors nodded politely but never asked too many questions. It was the kind of place where people were content not to know your past. She rented a modest cabin near the water, its floorboards creaking like tired bones. Every morning, she walked along the shore with a mug of weak coffee and an old coat that smelled faintly of cedar. She no longer wore makeup. Her hair, once styled like a magazine spread, now curled naturally, often pinned back with a pencil. No one there knew who she had been. To them, she was Amanda Clark, a name she chose from a list of her grandmother's side of the family. A quiet woman who paid rent on time and didn't attend town events. She liked it that way. Solitude, at least, was honest. Meanwhile, Naomi launched a YouTube channel 1 year after the scandal. It began with small videos on rebuilding trust and recognizing manipulation. But it grew fast. Within months, she became a sought-after voice in the online relationship therapy community. One video trended for weeks: "The day I took my power back," and her office. Amanda saw it. She watched the entire 24 minutes without blinking. Naomi never mentioned names, but the metaphors were sharp, unmistakable. "Some people wear confidence like armor," she said, "but take away the applause, and they collapse under their own echo." Amanda closed the laptop afterward and sat very still. She didn't cry, she didn't curse, she simply sat. Jacob had vanished. After the scandal, he deactivated everything. Rumors floated through LinkedIn ghost accounts and HR grapevines that he was working a desk job in Seattle. Something low profile. One message mentioned he lived with his mother. Amanda didn't pursue the details. Some absences are best left uninterrupted. Months passed in quiet loops. Amanda read books. She volunteered once at the local library but didn't return. She wrote a lot: essays, thoughts, half-finished letters never sent. Her journal became a daily ritual. One day, she received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper and familiar handwriting. It was from a former intern, Marissa. "You probably don't remember me," it began. "I was the quiet one during the bodega pitch. But I remember you. You taught me how to speak with my chest. You taught me that clarity is courage. I don't know what happened to you. I've heard things, sure, but I don't care. I just wanted you to know. I still carry your lessons. And I hope, wherever you are, you're teaching yourself something just as brave." Amanda read the letter twice. Then again, her hands trembled a little. But she didn't drop the paper. She didn't respond, not because she didn't want to, but because the letter didn't ask for anything. It only offered something rare: memory without judgment. That evening, Amanda sat by the lake longer than usual. The sun dipped low, the water gleamed silver, and the breeze was just cold enough to keep her grounded. She whispered something aloud, though no one was near enough to hear it. Not even the birds. "I made a mess," she said. Then, more quietly, "But I'm still here." She thought cybersecurity was about firewalls and passwords. She never imagined the real breach would be her heart. Samantha Lee was the kind of woman who believed in structure. Her desk at the logistics firm in Phoenix was meticulously organized, paperclips in a labeled tin. Highlighters lined up by warmth of color. She had been working there for 6 years. Reliable, efficient, friendly but never indulgent, a ghost in the hallways to those who didn't know her, but a quiet anchor to those who did. At home, she shared a quiet life with Brian, her husband of 7 years. Brian was a man of schedules and steel. Quite literally, he worked as a civil engineer, specializing in bridge design. His conversations were often rooted in measurements, stress loads, and contracts. Samantha used to find his steadiness soothing. But lately, she felt like she was living with a shadow who only talked in blueprints. They didn't fight, they didn't even disagree, but they had grown eerily quiet. It started with printer errors. Samantha's desktop froze every time she tried to access a database. IT sent Kevin Torres, a recent hire, 30, maybe. He wore simple polos, had kind eyes, and carried himself like someone who didn't need to be the center of attention to own the room. He fixed her issue in minutes. Didn't explain the fix too much, just enough to let her feel smart without making her feel inadequate. She smiled more that day. He made a comment about the framed photo on her desk, her and Brian. At a waterfall somewhere in Oregon. Kevin said it looked peaceful. Not everything is, she replied before she could stop herself. He didn't press, just nodded, like he understood. After that, it was small things. He offered to help when her spreadsheet crashed. She started requesting him specifically, claiming she didn't want to explain everything to someone new. He made her laugh. She started keeping a second pair of heels under her desk, just in case she stayed late. At home, Brian noticed she checked her phone more but rarely replied to texts in front of him. She said it was work. He believed her, or at least, wanted to. They stopped kissing goodnight. It wasn't a decision, just a series of moments that slipped through the cracks. Samantha claimed she was tired, had a headache, or needed to check on a project. Brian never questioned her. He thought love was about respect. And respect meant space. One evening, Brian was trying to print out a set of bridge calculations. But his own printer jammed. Samantha was in the shower. He grabbed her laptop, opened it, clicked on her email to send the file to himself. And there it was. Subject: still thinking about last night, you looked amazing. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. His hands trembled as he closed the screen. He put the laptop back exactly as he found it. When Samantha stepped out of the shower, towel around her waist, humming softly, he smiled and said, "Everything okay at work?" She nodded. "Just busy." Brian nodded too, as if that one word answered more than she realized. And somewhere inside him, a door began to creak open, the kind that once opened never truly closes again. Samantha never saw it. She was too busy watching her own firewalls fail. It began with a thank you email. Samantha had stayed late, and Kevin had helped her recover a corrupted presentation minutes before a major logistics review. Her message was formal, but Kevin's reply, "Happy to be your IT hero anytime," ended with a smiley face. It was juvenile, but she smiled. She didn't tell Brian. From there, they shared lunch once, just two colleagues grabbing sandwiches between meetings. But they laughed, really laughed. Kevin listened, tilted his head when she spoke. His compliments came easily, disarming her, validating her, drawing her further toward him like a tide that didn't announce itself until it swallowed your feet. They started emailing more, at first about work, then about movies, then about things they wouldn't say out loud in a crowded room. Samantha knew the company monitored email. That added to the thrill. She used words that left just enough to the imagination. Kevin, in return, made her feel like she was the only woman in the office. No. The only woman who mattered. One Thursday, after a long day troubleshooting a systems crash, Kevin suggested a drink. Just one. He said, "You look like you need to exhale." She said yes. She didn't plan to drink that much. Didn't plan to follow him into the elevator. Didn't plan to watch the door close behind them in a hotel 3 blocks from her office. That night, Samantha felt seen, desired, beautiful, something Brian hadn't said in months. As she lay beside Kevin, her mind whispered, "You are still wanted." The next morning, guilt was an ache in her spine. But by the time she reached her office, Kevin had already sent her a message. "Last night. Best mistake I've ever made." They kept talking. The texts became bolder. One afternoon, she sent a photo, nothing explicit, just enough to tease. He responded with something sharper. "Bet you wouldn't dare send more." She did. Eventually, the photos became nudes. Kevin asked for them, asked nicely. She obliged. It was dangerous, but he promised, "Just for me. Never anyone else." But things changed. Kevin's tone began to shift. He would reference the photos in unrelated chats. "Imagine if this spreadsheet leaked. Like that photo of yours." His smile in the hallway was still charming, but his messages left her uneasy. Samantha tried to brush it off. They were close. He was joking, right? Then one morning, just past 10 a.m., during a meeting about vendor rates, Melissa from sales walked in late, holding her phone like it had burned her. "Samantha," she said carefully, "I think you need to see this." She handed over the phone. It showed a Slack thread. A leaked photo, unmistakably Samantha, wearing nothing but a necklace she still wore that day. A caption underneath read, "Guess who forgot to encrypt their love life?" The room froze. Her boss stared at her. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her hands trembled. She ran, out of the conference room, out of the building, and somewhere in that chaos, Kevin's desk was already cleared. Brian didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He didn't even breathe heavily. He simply sat in the bedroom's muted light, eyes fixed on the email attachment from an anonymous address. The subject line had been vague, "Thought you should know." The contents were anything but. Samantha, nude, her face clearly visible, her body captured in a moment of trust and vulnerability, a trust that had now been weaponized. He stared at the image for a long time. He could feel the anger coiled tightly inside his chest. Not fiery but cold, the kind of anger that didn't roar, it calculated. Behind that image was a story, a series of choices, and Brian didn't need to see them play out to understand where it had all gone wrong. The absence of honesty had always been louder than any confession. He didn't confront her. He didn't wake her up. Instead, he packed a duffel bag. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, his toothbrush, 1 photo, their wedding. Sunlit and smiling, he paused for a moment before slipping it into the bag, unsure if it was an act of mourning or closure. And then, as the first light broke over Phoenix, he walked out. The front door closed softly. Finally, like the ending to a story that no longer needed to be told. Samantha didn't realize he was gone until the next morning. His side of the bed was cold. The closet door left slightly ajar. A silence more pronounced than usual. At the office, something was off. The usual bustle was there. Emails, coffee mugs, the click of keyboards, but it dulled as she passed by. Conversations ceased mid-sentence. One coworker gave her a glance that lingered a second too long. Another turned to the wall as if pretending to read a memo. She tried to shake it off. Maybe it was in her head. Maybe they were just distracted. Then her login failed. 3 times. Her inbox, locked. Her desk phone, dead tone. No explanation, no warning, just walls closing in. She headed for IT. Pulse pounding. Kevin sat in his corner desk, as calm and collected as always. Like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just set fire to her life. "You did this," she said, her voice raw. Kevin looked up, his eyes infuriatingly blank. "Did what?" "Don't play games. The photos, the emails, you leaked them." He leaned back in his chair, stretching slightly, as if this was a conversation about weather forecasts. "You sent him to me. I didn't hack anything. You clicked send. You posed. You trusted me." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She felt like she might explode. "I trusted you. Why would you do this to me?" He shrugged. "Because I could. The cruelty in those words wasn't in their volume, it was in the indifference. It wasn't rage, it was apathy. Her breath caught, her vision blurred. She turned and walked away, her heels echoing across the tiled floor like funeral bells. By the time she reached her car, her phone buzzed. Notification: legal documents filed. Brian had filed for divorce. She didn't open the email. She didn't need to. One line in the subject preview was enough: violation of trust. Back at home, alone, utterly alone, she wandered through the rooms like a ghost of herself. Everything looked familiar, but it all felt like it belonged to someone else. On the fridge were the magnets from their honeymoon. In the drawer, the anniversary cards still sat untouched. Every surface whispered betrayal, not of Brian, not of vows, but of herself. She sank to the floor of the kitchen, knees pulled up to her chest. The woman who had once carried herself with such confidence at weekly meetings was now reduced to shivering in silence. Afraid of her own reflection, she thought about calling someone, her sister, her college friend in Denver, anyone, but her fingers hovered over the screen. What would she say? How could she explain this? More importantly, who would believe she hadn't known it would end this way? The emails, the photos, the late nights, they had felt like an escape. Kevin had felt like someone who saw her, someone who made her feel alive. But it had all been smoke and mirrors. A cruel game played by someone who knew just how to dismantle a woman craving validation. She wasn't angry, she was hollow. When the tears finally came, they weren't loud, they weren't dramatic. They slipped quietly down her cheeks as she pressed her forehead against the cold kitchen floor. She had thought cybersecurity meant guarding data and information. She had never imagined she'd need it for her heart. The termination email arrived with clinical coldness. No meeting, no warning, no human voice to soften the final blow. Just a sterile subject line: final notice, termination of employment. Samantha stared at it, unmoving. Her coffee had gone cold in her hand. Forgotten the moment the message appeared. There was a numb ringing in her ears. A sensation like free fall. She read the body of the email again and again. But the words seemed to slide off her like water. Breach of internal conduct policy. Distribution of explicit material through company channels. Detrimental impact on workplace morale. No questions, no compassion, no chance for explanation. Meanwhile, Kevin remained untouched. There was no mention of him in any formal memo. He had been quietly moved to another department, facilities integration, and people whispered that someone higher up was protecting him. But no one asked questions. No one demanded justice. He was free to sip his coffee, joke with his new team, and walk the halls as if nothing had happened. Samantha, however, had become a ghost in her own city. Her attempts to rebuild started with optimism. She refreshed her resume, updated her LinkedIn, and began reaching out to contacts. But replies never came. The silence felt curated, deliberate. Then, out of desperation, she Googled herself. The results made her stomach twist. Headlines from local gossip blogs, anonymous forums, even reaction threads on Reddit. Her name had become synonymous with humiliation. One headline stood out: Phoenix admin scandal, how one email ruined everything. The articles didn't care about nuance. They didn't ask for her side of the story. They had screenshots. They had threads of speculation. They had comment sections filled with mockery. Why would you send those at work? One comment read, classic case of playing with fire. Bet she thought she was special. Said another. She slammed her laptop shut. Tears burning her eyes. Her breathing jagged. It wasn't just her job that was gone. It was her reputation. Her identity. Her friends, or people she thought were friends, stopped texting. Her gym partner canceled their sessions indefinitely. When she reached out to a few old coworkers, their replies were curt, evasive. The subtext was clear. We can't be associated with this. One night, she received a message from a former classmate she hadn't spoken to in years. It read, "Saw your name trending. Hope you're okay." She didn't answer. Weeks passed. Her therapist encouraged journaling and community support. Samantha tried. She opened her journal every night. Some entries were long, raw, bleeding with emotion. Others were only a single line. Like the one she wrote the night after her third rejected job interview. I used to believe I could fix things. Now I just wish I could disappear. She slept with the TV on. Not out of interest, but because silence had become unbearable. The shadows in her apartment stretched longer now. Time warped. Daylight felt hostile. Night offered no peace. She'd lost weight, skipped meals, forgot them. Sleep came in 2-hour bursts. Her doctor prescribed mild sedatives. She filled the bottle, lined the pills in her palm, and counted them once before putting them away. It wasn't a plan, yet. But the thought of escape lingered in her mind like a low hum. The final blow came not from another article, but a letter. Her neighborhood association, once friendly, once filled with women who waved as she watered plants, had sent a formal notice. Following recent publicity surrounding your name, we believe it's best for you to refrain from attending future events. She sat on the porch for hours after reading it, not crying, not thinking, just watching the street, hoping someone might pass by and smile. No one did. That night, she wrote, I thought the leak was digital, but it broke something deeper, something no patch can fix. She thought about Brian often, about the way he used to pour her coffee before leaving for work. The way he would tap her shoulder twice when walking past, a silent, affectionate habit. It had stopped months before the affair began, but she never noticed until it was too late. She drafted a message to him, something simple, something that didn't ask for forgiveness but acknowledged the wreckage. I miss who I was when we were us. She never sent it. Instead, she saved it to a folder labeled unsent, alongside several other letters. Apologies, and one short recording of her crying in the dark. The file was titled, Monday. On Sunday, she drove an hour north and parked by a lake she'd visited once as a teenager. It was still, silvered by early morning mist. She stood by the water's edge for a long time, clutching a thermos of coffee she didn't drink. The world didn't end, the lake didn't offer redemption, but in that silence, she heard herself breathe again, heard the sound of something inside her, not healed, not whole, but alive. She returned home that evening, unpacked the groceries, fed the cat, brushed her teeth, went to bed. No nightmares that night, just sleep, and the smallest thought, fragile, barely formed. Maybe survival was a kind of victory. 2. The name on her new ID read Sarah Nolan. It wasn't a name she chose because it meant anything. It was the one that came up on a name generator she clicked through at 3 a.m. on a sleepless night. Somewhere between heartbreak and resignation. But when the new card arrived in the mail, she stared at it for a long time. It looked clean, unmarked, like maybe, just maybe, she could be that person. A woman with no history, no scandal. Samantha, or Sarah, now, lived in a town so small it didn't show up on most national weather apps. A speck of humanity wrapped around a lake in rural Utah. The kind of place where people asked you about the weather, not your past. She rented a studio cabin behind an old gas station and took a job at the roadside cafe, pouring coffee for truckers and weekend fishermen. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't even comfortable, but it was quiet, and for the first time in months, her name wasn't whispered in disgust. At night, she would sit on the wooden porch outside the cabin, listening to the wind whip through the pine trees, sometimes with a mug of tea, sometimes with nothing but the sound of her own breath. There were still bad nights, days when a certain tone in a customer's voice, or the flicker of a phone screen, sent her spiraling, when she'd excuse herself, lock the cafe bathroom, and sit on the floor until her pulse slowed. But she always came back out. The hardest part wasn't starting over. It was forgiving herself. She hadn't spoken to Brian in almost 2 years. There had been no angry emails, no closure, just a forwarded invitation that made its way to the last shared address they'd lived in, a wedding invitation, embossed in silver and cream. Brian was getting remarried. The bride's name was Ashley. Samantha stared at the invitation for a long time, then folded it back into its envelope and slid it into the back of a drawer. She wasn't angry, not anymore, just hollow. He had found peace. She had found anonymity. That was their balance now. And Kevin, she hadn't thought of him in weeks. Not until his name popped up in a news article shared by a customer at the cafe. She almost dropped the tray she was carrying. Former IT specialist charged in workplace data abuse scandal. A new company, a new victim. This time, the evidence was irrefutable. Screenshots, logs, messages. The article said he'd been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation, but the tone was different this time. He wasn't protected, he wasn't invisible, he was exposed. Samantha read every line twice. Then she folded the article and burned it in a tin can behind the cafe. She didn't feel triumphant, only tired. That night, she received an email, no subject line. The sender was a name she recognized, a coworker from the Phoenix office. Someone who had laughed at her jokes. Someone who had said nothing when the storm hit. The message read, "You were wrong to trust him. But I was wrong not to speak up. I'm sorry." Samantha read it once, then again. She let it sit open on her screen while she washed dishes, brushed her hair, turned off the lights. Then she came back, hovered over the delete button, and pressed it. Not because she was angry, not because she hadn't wanted to hear it, but because she didn't need it. She was still standing. The next morning, she opened the cafe early. The sky was a pale lavender, the lake below reflecting the first hints of sun. She brewed the coffee, wiped the counters, tied her apron, and when the bell above the door rang and the first customer stepped inside, she smiled, not with performance, not with effort, but with something close to ease. Maybe she would always carry the scar. Maybe the internet would never forget. But she was no longer Samantha Lee. The scandal. She was Sarah Nolan, the woman who stayed, the one who got back up. And in that tiny cafe in Nowhere, Utah. That was enough. It had to be. Blank, underscore, blank. Infidelity doesn't always start in the bedroom. Sometimes, it starts in the inbox. You can change your number. You can change your name. But trust, once broken, it leaves a scar under every password. Some betrayals go viral, but the silence afterward, that's the part that kills. She always said hospitality was about precision. Predictable patterns, clean lines, schedules that worked like heartbeat rhythms. Emily Carter, 39, took pride in the seamless operation of the Drake and Monroe Hotel in downtown Chicago. Nothing fell out of place on her watch. But that was before Ryan. The first time Sean noticed the change. It was a Tuesday, late October. Emily had come home long after midnight, the scent of whiskey lingering in the folds of her coat. "You okay?" he had asked, rising from the couch, concern etched gently into the lines of his forehead. "Just inventory issues," she mumbled, toeing off her heels. "The new bar system's a mess." Sean believed her, because for 7 years, believing her had never been a mistake. Their marriage wasn't flashy, but it was reliable, like the way he always made her tea without asking, or how she kissed his shoulder in the mornings instead of saying goodbye. But routines can fray. The hotel had hired a new bartender, a transfer from New York. Ryan Ford, 26, tattoos on his forearms, a confidence that didn't try too hard. Emily mentioned him casually at first. "He actually understands cocktail ratios," she said over dinner one night. "Not like the last guy." Then it was, "He stayed late to help restock without even being asked." Then, "He's surprisingly insightful about people." Sean didn't say much, but he noticed how often she mentioned Ryan. He noticed when Emily began working later, saying the night shifts needed more oversight. He noticed how she silenced her phone during dinner, how she took it with her into the bathroom, how she laughed at her screen when she thought he wasn't looking. One Friday evening, Sean offered to pick her up after work. She declined, too quickly. "No need, I'll probably be late. Night audit meeting." He didn't push, just kissed her cheek and watched her leave, a faint unease tightening in his chest. That night, he waited up. Midnight came, no sign of her. When she walked in at 1:17 a.m., there was a faint smear of lipstick that wasn't hers on her collar. She didn't notice. He didn't ask. Sean wasn't the jealous type. But silence breeds speculation, and speculation, unchecked, can rot even the strongest wood. Emily, meanwhile, was floating somewhere between excitement and guilt. Ryan made her feel present, seen. He had a way of tilting his head when she spoke, as if her every word mattered. When he complimented her, it wasn't about her performance metrics or managerial acumen. It was her laugh, her eyes, the way she carried herself in heels. She hadn't heard those things in years. She told herself it was harmless. Just conversation, flirtation, maybe, but nothing real, nothing serious. But the way she lingered near the bar after hours, the way their texts drifted into late-night territory, it was a slope, slick and steeper than she realized. Back at home, Sean grew quieter. He began cooking dinners for one. Watching TV alone, their bed, once a shared sanctuary, became divided by silence. Emily told herself it was just stress. A phase. That nothing had happened yet. Until the email came. It was anonymous. No subject. Just a Dropbox link and one line. "You should probably see what your wife does at work." Sean didn't open it right away. His hands trembled too much. His mind flooded with denial. Emily would never. She was devoted, loyal, she had integrity. But curiosity is cruel, and truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The footage was grainy. Elevator camera, time stamped at 12:43 a.m. 2 figures. Emily, Ryan, close, too close. Ryan's hand on her waist. Emily's head tilted back in laughter. Then, Sean stopped watching. He stood in the quiet of their kitchen, the fridge humming behind him, and felt the weight of betrayal settle into his bones. Later, people would ask why he didn't confront her immediately. But some silences are too loud to speak over. And some betrayals cut too cleanly to bleed right away. In the dark, he whispered to no one. "I thought she was just tired. I thought I knew my wife." Outside, Chicago slept. Inside, everything had changed. The scent was different. That's where it started. Not the affair, but the awareness of it. Sean couldn't put his finger on it at first. But when Emily leaned in to kiss him goodnight, her skin carried a fragrance that wasn't hers. Not quite floral, not quite musky, just unfamiliar and sharp. He said nothing. It had been a long day. Emily worked late again, covering the evening shift at the Langston Hotel after a surprise inspection threw schedules into chaos. That's what she told him. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? Emily Carter was the kind of woman who got things done, kept it together, and made high expectations look routine. But lately, her routines had changed. She stayed longer at the hotel, even when she wasn't technically needed. Her phone never left her side. Sean noticed the way she tilted the screen slightly away from him while texting. The laugh that escaped her lips while she cooked, then stopped when she caught his eye. The sudden attention to appearance, fresh lipstick at 9 p.m. A new perfume she claimed was a free sample. And then there was Ryan. 26, charming, and dangerously observant. He was hired only a month ago to tend the rooftop bar. Emily introduced him to Sean once at a staff party. Sean had extended a friendly hand. Ryan's grip was firm but quick. His smile just a few degrees too bright. "He's smart," Emily had said later, casually. "You'd like him if you talk more." Sean didn't want to talk more. He wanted his wife back. On the night of the quarterly staff party, Emily told Sean not to wait up. It was tradition for management to celebrate late with staff. She said, the rooftop bar would be closed to guests, and she needed to ensure everything went smoothly. That night, Sean fell asleep on the couch, the TV casting blue light over his quiet living room. Emily came home just before dawn. She smelled like gin and citrus and something Sean didn't have words for. Something too raw to be on her skin. The next day, at work, a private message pinged on Sean's desktop. It was from a former intern at the hotel who now freelanced in IT support. No text, just a video file. The name read, elevator_7_0103m.mov. Sean hesitated only a second before clicking play. The footage was grainy, but not enough to obscure reality. The elevator camera captured everything. Emily stepping in at 1:03 a.m., followed closely by Ryan. She pressed the button for the 18th floor but didn't let the doors close. Ryan pinned her against the wall, her hands in his hair, his mouth on her neck. No hesitation, no shame, just hunger. It lasted under 60 seconds. Sean closed the window. The silence in the office buzzed louder than any fluorescent light above him. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he simply sat back and exhaled, slow, controlled, as if trying not to break his own ribs with grief. Meanwhile, back at the hotel, someone else had already seen the video. The footage had been pulled earlier that day by a junior tech checking an unrelated network glitch. He recognized Ryan first, recognized Emily next. He didn't like Ryan, never did. Found his arrogance too slick, too performative. The tech shared the video in a private WhatsApp group with a few coworkers. Thought y'all should see what's going on in elevator 7. The caption read. From there, it spread fast. TikTok, Reddit, a Discord server for hotel employees around the city. The faces were blurred slightly in some clips. But not enough. People didn't need confirmation. Her walk, her voice, her signature necklace. It was all there. Emily found out the next morning when her assistant walked into her office with an iPad. Pale and trembling. "Mom, you need to see this." The clip was looping on Twitter. The comment section was brutal. Memes, crude hashtags. Even guests began referring to her as Miss 7. She watched the footage only once. Her hand trembled not from the content, but from the knowledge of what came next. Her husband had likely seen it. Her staff had definitely seen it. And soon, the board would, too. For a brief moment, Emily felt her knees buckle. She steadied herself against the glass desk. Outside her office window, the Chicago skyline rose indifferent and cold. Inside, she was unraveling. And somewhere down in facilities, Ryan was pouring himself a coffee, smiling like the world still spun for him. Emily Carter had always managed every crisis. But this time, the disaster was her, and the whole hotel was watching. The boardroom lights were too bright, and the silence too sharp. Emily sat at the long glass table, hands folded, knuckles white. Across from her were 3 men and 2 women, all in suits. One of them was another, legal counsel, the rest, senior board members. All with measured stares. A folder was slid toward her. "This outlines the formal complaint. Ms. Carter," said the woman from Her tone was gentle, almost pitying. "As per policy, you are being placed on immediate leave pending internal review." Emily reached for the folder but didn't open it. Her throat burned. She nodded slowly, trying to speak but finding no voice. Her signature, when she finally scribbled it at the bottom of the form, looked like someone else had written it. They thanked her for her service. No one met her eyes. She walked out of the room like a ghost. Her office felt colder, smaller. A printed memo had already been placed on her desk, effective immediately. "Your access credentials have been suspended." When she got home, Sean wasn't there. His shoes were gone, so was his toothbrush. On the dining table sat a small jewelry box. Inside was his wedding ring. No note, just finality. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, staring at it for what could have been hours. She didn't cry, not yet, not until she opened the wine. And then it came in waves. Not the betrayal, not the scandal, but the realization she'd burned the only bridge she never thought she could lose. Ryan didn't answer her calls. Not the first day, not the second. On the third, she showed up at his apartment. He opened the door shirtless, a drink in hand. Music played behind him. There was laughter inside. "You said it was just between us," Emily said, voice shaking. "You promised." Ryan shrugged. "I didn't send the video." "Emily, you think I'm stupid? That was the IT guy, not me. But you could speak up," she said. "Tell them it wasn't what it looked like. That you pressured me." "Pressured?" He laughed, loud and sharp. "You came on to me. You ran the show. Don't rewrite it now just because it blew up." Her hand trembled at her side. "I trusted you," He sipped his drink. It was fun. That's all. You made it something else. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the glass in his face like her heart begged her to. She turned and walked away, every step heavier than the last. Back at the hotel, the investigation committee convened without her. The footage had done its damage. But the rumor mill did more. Someone had sent the clip to a local blogger. Within hours, it was trending. Executive hotel manager caught on tape, read the headline on BuzzFeed. Her name was never mentioned officially. But they didn't need to. Commenters pieced it together. Her LinkedIn, her past interviews, her face. She tried deactivating everything. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. But the screenshots had a life of their own. In the final meeting before her termination, Emily spoke through tears. I built this hotel's reputation. I carried every holiday season, every celebrity meltdown, every crisis, and I broke the one rule I always taught my team: never bring the storm indoors. A pause, a breath. I thought I could control it. Even fire, if you cup it gently, can be warm, but I didn't cup it. I fed it, and now it's burning down everything. No one clapped, no one consoled her, they just moved to the next agenda item. Outside, a junior employee stood by the elevator and couldn't meet her gaze. But Emily walked out with her head high, not because she felt proud, but because pride was all she had left. The elevator chimed. She stepped in. Same elevator, same camera, but this time, she was alone. The official letter arrived on Monday morning. A courier dropped it at the concierge desk of her condo building, where it waited in a neutral white envelope. No logos, no fanfare, just the weight of consequence folded in three. Emily picked it up in silence, already knowing what it contained. No hearing, no appeal, just a verdict, effective immediately. Your employment with the Langston Group is terminated. Grounds: personal conduct unbecoming and in violation of ethical clauses 7.1 and 7.3. She read the line 3 times. Each word landed like a stamp across her chest. The world didn't stop turning. But hers did. Sean filed for divorce 2 days later. The petition came through her attorney. Irreconcilable differences. Substantiated by visual evidence. No preamble, no conversation, just a man severing himself from the rot. Emily never blamed him. She only wondered if he cried the night he left or if he felt relief. The silver band on her finger had started to itch like a scar before it heals. She took it off and left it on the bathroom counter, the same way Sean had done with his. She applied to 17 hotels in the first week. By the end of week 2, every interview ended the same way: polite interest, then sudden cancellations, or worse, silence. It only took one Google search. Her name auto-filled with the word elevator. Her professional image, once pristine, was now a meme. Elevator Emily trended for 72 hours, accompanied by GIFs and audio loops of the surveillance video's silent embrace. Ryan, meanwhile, had pivoted. He launched a TikTok under the handle @RealRianites, where he leaned into a curated persona of the misunderstood bartender. His first post, a blurred parody reenactment of the elevator moment, with the caption, "Mistakes were made. But were they mine?" It went viral. Emily watched it once. That was enough. The comments weren't cruel, not all of them. Some called him gross, others called him clever, but no one defended her. Former colleagues ghosted her. The senior assistant who once brought her coffee unfollowed her LinkedIn. Even the residential women's group she'd volunteered with sent an email titled, "Update to Committee Membership." Her name was missing from the list. It was 2:17 a.m. when she finally watched the elevator video again. Really watched it, not with panic, or dread, or denial, but with detachment. The woman in the frame wasn't powerful, wasn't even present. She looked like someone seeking something in the worst possible place. The way she kissed, the way she leaned in, wasn't lust. It was need. It was emptiness with lipstick. A cry in disguise. Emily whispered aloud in her apartment. Quiet as snow. I don't see a woman being seductive. I see a woman desperate to feel wanted. She closed the laptop. No tears came, not because she was strong, but because she was empty. And in that emptiness, for the first time, she heard herself breathe again. The city outside moved on without her. Headlines shifted, scandals rotated, but inside, she remained, not the villain, not the victim, just a woman learning. Too late. What fire does when you think it's only warming your hands. It burns everything you touch. The wind was colder in Minnesota. Not brutal like Chicago winters, but quieter. Quieter in a way that felt less like punishment and more like permission to disappear. Emily Carter, now Emily Reeves, woke each morning to the sound of coffee machines and the scent of baked scones. The small lakeside cafe she worked in didn't ask about her past. The manager had seen the scars in her eyes and decided to let them be. That, in itself, was mercy. She poured lattes, wiped tables, memorized regulars' orders. No one asked what she did before. No one whispered when she passed. Some days, the silence was suffocating. Other days, it saved her. The apartment she rented was above the cafe. Small, warm, one window overlooked the lake. In winter, the glass frosted over and Emily would draw shapes into the frost with her finger. Loops. Spirals. Her initials without meaning. She didn't keep mirrors. One afternoon, she walked to the town library. Not because she needed a book, but because she missed the feeling of being anonymous in a room full of thoughts. At the community bulletin board, tucked between flyers for piano lessons and missing cats, was a photo, Sean. It was a wedding announcement. His smile was the same. The woman beside him had kind eyes and wore a pin from a non-profit group Emily vaguely recognized. The date was 2 weeks ago. She didn't cry, just stood there, hand gripping the strap of her canvas bag until her knuckles went white. She whispered, "I hope you're happy," and she meant it. Later that week, she opened her email. A message sat in her inbox. Subject line, "From someone who still remembers." The sender was Alyssa, a junior staff member from the hotel. The message was short. "I don't agree with what happened. But I also remember how you stayed up during the blackout to calm the guests. How you gave me your shoes when mine broke at the gala. You were the reason I believed women could lead. I still do." Emily read it twice. She didn't reply, but she saved the email in a folder labeled, "Proof." Outside, snow began to fall. Through the cafe window, Emily watched children run, slip, and laugh. A young couple held hands. Cheeks red from the cold. She pressed her palm to the glass. Not to leave a mark, but to feel the cold. It grounded her. She wasn't healed, not yet, maybe never fully, but she was surviving. And in that moment, that was enough. Blank, blank. Infidelity doesn't always start in the bedroom. Sometimes, it starts in the hallway, in the elevator, in the pause before a goodbye. You can change your name. You can change your job. But the version of you who broke someone's trust, she walks beside you until you learn how to forgive her. Some betrayals go viral, but the silence afterward, that's the part that lingers. I used to think she was just busy. Lunch meetings, pitch rehearsals, agency calls. Brittany Collins always had a reason to step out around noon. That was normal in our world. Until one Tuesday, I caught a glimpse of something that didn't fit. A faint bruise just beneath her jawline. A place where you'd expect perfume. Or maybe, once, a kiss. But this was something else. Brittany was 34, tall, angular, and impossibly composed. The kind of woman who wore tailored blazers even on casual Fridays and could shut down a bad idea with one eyebrow. As the lead designer at Halston and more creative, she carried weight. Clients trusted her. Interns idolized her, and no one, absolutely no one, dared to ask about her personal life. She'd been married once, briefly. There were no photos on her desk, no ring on her finger. If anyone asked, she'd say, that was another life, and no one pushed. Until a few weeks ago, Brittany had been constant, predictable, the kind of person who chose her words like a surgeon chose tools, clean, exact, and necessary. But something had shifted. A softness had crept into her features, like someone had lit a candle inside her. She started wearing lipstick again, the kind that left prints on paper coffee cups. She laughed more, not the polite kind, the real kind, low and throaty, like it had been waiting years to escape. And then there were the lunches. They used to be solitary affairs, a salad, her sketchpad, but lately, she'd vanish from the office. Sometimes for 2 hours. The receptionist said she'd seen Brittany getting into a silver SUV around noon most days. She said the man driving it was tall, handsome, had a wedding ring. His name was Travis Monroe, 36, senior brand strategist, married, 2 kids. He transferred from the LA office 6 months ago. Friendly, charismatic, known for bringing donuts to meetings and remembering your dog's name. No one thought anything of it when Brittany and Travis started collaborating more. They were a powerhouse, his strategy, her design. Clients loved the dynamic, but then came the parking lot conversations. The subtle lean-ins, the way Brittany once touched his tie in the break room, flattening a crease that didn't exist. Still, it was office gossip, nothing more, until Ava, the new intern, said something. I didn't mean to stare. She whispered to me, eyes wide, but I saw him, Travis. He got out of Brittany's car. It was parked behind the building. You know, near the loading dock. He was adjusting his belt. I didn't believe her, or didn't want to, but something about the way she said it, the careful horror in her voice, made my stomach knot. That afternoon, Brittany came back from lunch flushed. Not the cold weather kind. Her blouse was slightly wrinkled. Her smile lingered too long. I tried not to notice. Tried to focus on my work. But the image of Travis adjusting his belt replayed like a loop. That evening, I watched her walk to her car. Travis followed 10 minutes later. His jacket slung over his shoulder like a teenager leaving detention. He looked around before unlocking his car. Paranoia is a slippery thing. It doesn't announce itself. It seeps in, and once it's there, everything you see confirms it. The next day, Brittany called in late. Client emergency, she texted, but the system logs showed no scheduled meeting. Her Slack status stayed green. Travis wasn't in either. People whispered. They always do, but Brittany, she didn't seem to care. Or maybe, just maybe, she believed she was untouchable. What no one knew, what she couldn't have known, was that Amanda Monroe, Travis's wife, had just joined a private Facebook group for betrayed spouses. And she had questions. Big ones. The thing about secrets is, they don't stay still, they twitch, they flicker, they leave traces, even when you try to scrub them clean. Brittany Collins had become meticulous. Her texts with Travis Monroe were moved to an encrypted app that auto-deleted every 24 hours. She kept her phone on silent. Screen always face down. Notifications cleared. She thought she was being careful. Thought she was controlling the story. They met now in parking garages, hotel lobbies under assumed names. And once, in the conference room after hours when the janitorial staff was still on break. Travis had a keycard no one monitored. Brittany brought a blanket, as if desire needed cushioning. At work, she was still Brittany the Ice Queen, but her hands lingered a little too long on mock-ups with Travis. She leaned in when he whispered brand revisions. Her laughs were timed. Her eyes darted toward the elevators a little too often after 5 p.m. Travis played his part. Meetings scheduled at 11:45 a.m. that mysteriously stretched until 2 p.m. Creative strategy lunches, he called them, though his breath always smelled faintly of her perfume when he returned. He'd wipe his phone screen with a cloth before going home, deleting their chat history religiously. But habits make mistakes. It was a Wednesday. A client pitch had run long. Brittany returned to the office in a rush, her blazer askew, and a faint smudge of lipstick at the edge of her collarbone. She didn't notice, but someone else did. Layla Tran, one of the copywriters, caught it as Brittany leaned over the conference table. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't say anything, not then, but later. In the elevator, Layla pulled out her phone and zoomed in on a photo she'd quietly taken. A glint of something private. Something not meant for office hours. Something that didn't look like Brittany at all. Layla wasn't cruel, but she was curious. And Amanda Monroe, she was already suspicious. Amanda had lived with gut feelings for weeks now. Travis had changed. He was always just tired. Always late. Always locked to his phone. And once, when she did the laundry, she found a receipt for a boutique hotel not 5 miles from his office. He said it was for a client, a brand immersion stay. But his voice had that too smooth flatness, like someone reading from a prompt. Amanda worked in digital marketing. She knew how to look. She created a fake email, anonymized, sent a message to herself from a name she knew would grab Travis' attention, BC Confidential. She waited. That night, he clicked the link, didn't know she had remote monitoring set up. And what she saw stunned her. Archived messages, photos, notes, one from Brittany, timestamped 3 days ago. Lunch was worth the risk. Still thinking about your hands on my neck. Amanda sat in the dark, staring at the screen, her breath caught in her chest like a sob that refused to leave. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she screenshot everything. The next day, Brittany received flowers to the office. No card. That night, Travis got home to silence. Amanda had taken the kids to her sister's. On the dining table was an envelope. Inside, 7 printed screenshots. A post-it on top. Lunch tasted like betrayal. Amanda didn't plan revenge. She orchestrated it. Through a mutual friend, a woman who once worked security for a nightclub, she got in touch with someone who handled things. Not legally, not cleanly, but clearly. She gave one instruction: make it public. Not lethal, just loud. A message. It happened on a Monday. The team had just finished a stand-up meeting. Brittany was walking toward the coffee bar when a woman stepped into the lobby. No uniform. No name tag, but purposeful. 3 slaps. A hard shove. A hissed. This is for Amanda. Security broke it up in under a minute. HR tried to contain the chaos. But 5 employees filmed it. 2 uploaded within the hour. The video, viral by noon. In the footage, Brittany's hair is pulled, her blouse torn slightly at the seam, her eyes wide not just with fear, but recognition, that she had crossed an invisible line. Not just of fidelity, but of consequence. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They had become a storm. It happened on a Wednesday. Mid-morning, just after the first round of meetings. Brittany had stepped into the elevator on the 12th floor. Her coffee still steaming, her phone in hand as she skimmed through Slack messages. The doors had barely begun to close when a figure shoved through them, a woman. Helmet in hand, face twisted in fury. "Homewrecker," the woman shrieked. And before Brittany could even register the voice, the helmet came crashing down. Pain exploded behind her eyes. She stumbled, dropping her phone. Another blow landed, hard, this time on her shoulder. The sound of cracking bone echoed through the steel walls. Brittany screamed, curling to protect her head. But the attacker was relentless. Security pulled the woman off less than a minute later. But the damage was done. Blood on the floor. Brittany, limp, screams echoing through the building's PA as someone called for medical assistance. A silence followed, thick and horrified. And then, of course, the videos. The elevator had a camera. Every floor had one. And someone in security, or perhaps someone else with access, downloaded the footage. Within an hour, it was circulating internally. By lunchtime, it had hit Twitter, Reddit, TikTok. People clipped the footage, overlaid it with dramatic music, and added subtitles. "Corporate mistress gets what she deserves." Design lead beaten over affair with married man. Brittany brawl, elevator edition. Her name trended locally, then nationally. She awoke in a hospital bed. Head bandaged, arm in a cast. The room smelled of disinfectant and wilted flowers. Her assistant, Janelle, sat by her side, but wouldn't meet her eyes. "They want you to take leave," Janelle said softly, twisting her hands. "Unpaid." HR said it's until further notice. Brittany stared at the ceiling, lips dry. Travis, has he? Janelle looked away. He hasn't been in today. Later that afternoon, Brittany called him, straight to voicemail. She tried again, nothing. And then the text. I don't know anything about that. I'm sorry. That was it. No visit, no questions, no concern, just a 6-word severance of whatever connection they'd built. The hospital discharged her the next day. Her apartment felt too big, too silent. She hadn't drawn the blinds in days. Online, the clips kept resurfacing. Friends stopped replying. Clients cancelled meetings. Her mother called but only left voicemails that began with, "I just don't understand why." Brittany didn't listen to the end of any of them. One night, unable to sleep from the dull, constant ache in her head and arm, she opened her journal. The pen hovered for a long while before she wrote, "I thought it was a secret romance. But it was a public execution." Then, beneath it, "I mistook adrenaline for affection. I mistook silence for discretion. I mistook him for someone brave." The next day, she received an email from HR. "Pending internal review of your recent conduct and its impact on workplace integrity. Your employment remains suspended." No mention of Travis, no mention of accountability on his end. Just her name, her photo, her punishment. Outside, Denver was covered in spring frost. But inside Brittany, everything had turned to ice. She sat by the window for hours. Not moving, not thinking, just watching the light shift across the buildings. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she realized, this wasn't heartbreak. This was erasure. The kind that starts slow, like a corner of a page burning, and ends in ash before you even notice the flame. There was no going back. There was only what remained. Travis never showed up at the hospital. Not once. And when Brittany was discharged, it wasn't his arms she leaned into, but the cold metal railing outside the emergency wing. As she waited for a cab alone, the silence between them wasn't just awkward now, it was deliberate. Weaponized. Travis had returned to Amanda. His social media disappeared overnight, Instagram wiped, LinkedIn set to private. Rumor had it, he was attending counseling, rebuilding, repenting, to the world. He was a man who had made a mistake and was trying to atone. Brittany, meanwhile, was not rebuilding, she was unraveling. Her arm ached from the cast. Her head still bore the dull hum of trauma. The apartment she once prided herself on now felt hostile in its stillness. The bed, queen-sized, with monogrammed pillows and silk sheets, felt too big, too empty, and yet, too confining, a velvet cage where silence echoed louder than any accusation. No one from the office visited. No fruit baskets, no sympathy cards, just an official envelope, 2 days post-discharge, slid under her door like a final insult. The company had terminated her contract. Not for the incident directly, of course. The language was antiseptic, detached, violation of professional ethics and behavioral expectations. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it beside her untouched glass of water. It joined the growing pile of things she no longer knew what to do with, unopened mail, unanswered messages, dreams. She tried freelancing. Her portfolio was strong. Her name had weight, once. But every Zoom call dissolved after the first consultation. Clients grew cold after the background check. One of them even said it aloud, half apologizing. "It's just, when we Googled you, it was hard to unsee the context." There was context now, so much context. Context she didn't choose. Context that had a life of its own. Reddit threads dissected her body language in slow motion. TikToks mimicked her scream in the elevator, layered with auto-tune and emojis. A YouTuber made a breakdown video titled, "How One Affair Destroyed a Designer's Career in 3 Days." Her pain, repackaged. Her face, a thumbnail. She was content. For clicks. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Her gym pass was revoked after someone posted her photo on a bulletin board labeled, "Not Welcome." Even the cafe where she'd once doodled campaign ideas over espresso seemed to flinch when she entered. The barista stopped asking her name. Just handed her the cup. Eyes down. Brittany once considered herself strong, independent. She'd built herself from the ground up after her divorce, carved a career from thin air. But now, mornings came with a question. Why get dressed? For who? To where? She stopped using mirrors, stopped checking email. Days blurred, nights stretched, time moved in strange patterns when you had nowhere to be and no one expecting you. Until one afternoon, she passed the hallway mirror. The cast was gone, the bruises faded, but there, just beneath her temple, a small pale scar remained. She touched it, lightly, as if to check if it was still real. Her own eyes stared back at her, older, thinner, hollowed, not destroyed, but changed. And then, quietly, without theatrics, she whispered, "This is who I chose to be." Not who she dreamed of, not who she wanted to become, but the sum total of all her decisions. And for the first time, there was no denial in her voice, just fact. She turned away from the mirror, but not before offering herself the smallest nod. A beginning, maybe, or just an end acknowledged. Brittany moved without telling anyone. No farewell dinner, no cryptic social media post. Just a quiet departure from Denver and a one-way bus ticket to a small, snow-swept town near the mountains of Montana. A place with no past to haunt her and no one to recognize the bruised ghost behind her new name, Ellie Monroe. She found work at a local decor shop, Hearth and Hollow, a charming little place that smelled of pine wood and cinnamon, where tourists bought overpriced trinkets and locals ordered custom wreaths for their front doors. The owner, Martha, a widow with kind eyes and no questions, took to Ellie quickly. "Steady hands," she said, "and a good eye for balance." Every morning, Ellie watered the succulents, brewed coffee in the back room, and arranged window displays no one ever critiqued. The silence was different here. It didn't accuse, it allowed space to breathe. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that people knew. Not her story, not her name, but something. An energy, a weight. Shame has a way of wearing through even the thickest coat. She lived in a modest apartment above a bookstore, where the ceiling leaked in spring and the heater wheezed like an old man in winter. But it was hers, quiet, anonymous, and clean, a place where she could learn how to disappear correctly. Then, one afternoon, as snow flurried lightly outside, she was scrolling on her phone, no notifications, just habit, when she saw a familiar face. Travis. A thread on Reddit titled, "Serial Cheater Exposed by His Own Wife." Amanda had gone public. Photos, texts, dates, voice memos, not just Brittany, dozens of women. Some barely legal, some colleagues, some strangers. There he was, frozen in mid-laugh, holding a margarita beside a new brunette. The comments were savage. A few even mentioned the elevator incident, connecting timelines, piecing together the scandal like amateur sleuths. Brittany didn't laugh, didn't rage. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then slowly, deliberately, she powered off the phone and set it face down on the counter. Later that week, a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, walked into the store with her father. Looking for ribbon, she stared at Brittany with the wide-eyed curiosity only children possess. "Did you always work here?" the girl asked. Brittany smiled gently. "No, sweetie, I used to make things beautiful. Now I just try not to break them." The girl blinked. "That sounds sad." "Sometimes," Brittany said, leaning down to tie the ribbon into a bow. "But sometimes it's peaceful." That night, as snow fell heavy and soft against the windowpane, Brittany, or Ellie, opened her journal. Her handwriting was steadier now. She wrote, "Forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you survive through." Then she looked at her scar in the mirror. Still there, but fainter. Not gone, but no longer the sharpest thing about her. The next morning, she wore red lipstick, not for anyone, just to remember she could. "He looked at me like I was the only woman in the room, turns out. I was just the only one with signing power." Claire Matthews had long stopped believing in workplace charm. At 30, she had spent the better part of the past decade navigating boardrooms, brand crises, and the brittle egos of clients with more money than taste. Her world was campaigns, clients, and cost sheets, precision, discipline, distance. She had also stopped believing in people. A little bit, or rather, in romance. Her last relationship, 3 years ago, had ended with a locked phone, an unpaid rent bill, and a carefully timed apology text that arrived 3 days too late. Since then, Claire had grown armor, smart blazers, sharp shoes, and a tongue that could slice a bad pitch in half. When Mason Cole walked into the office for the first time, he wasn't just another creative. He was a force. 42, salt and pepper hair that looked curated, not aged, a voice like velvet on concrete, and the kind of presence that made junior designers sit up straighter and senior VPs soften their tone. He didn't push to impress. He just did. Claire noticed the way he made eye contact during meetings, prolonged, deliberate, never quite crossing the line, but always hovering near it. The first time they spoke, it was about budget constraints for a fragrance launch. "You have final sign-off, right?" he asked, a grin playing at the edge of his mouth. "Technically," she replied. He leaned forward, voice lowered. "Then I guess I better be nice to you." It was a joke, a line, but Claire felt something twitch in her stomach, not desire, exactly, but recognition, of danger, of a game she hadn't played in years. The messages started small, follow-ups, quick clarifications, a meme about overworked brand teams. Then, a late night, still up, just had an idea for the tagline, followed by, "Don't worry, I won't pitch it until you've had your morning coffee." She told herself it was just work. Mason was hands-on, passionate, and yes, flattering, but Claire wasn't some intern with a crush. She was seasoned, controlled, immune. Or so she thought. She started choosing blouses that framed her collarbone, lipstick that didn't fade after lunch. Her smiles lasted longer when Mason was in the room. And when he wasn't, she noticed his absence. There was a Thursday afternoon when he waited by her desk instead of emailing. "Thought I'd drop this off in person," he said, handing her the revised storyboard. Their fingers brushed, static. Claire didn't flinch. Lunches became meetings. Meetings became drinks. Drinks never crossed the line into anything romantic. But they hovered there, dangerously familiar. She caught herself glancing at her phone more often. When he texted, "Sweet dreams," she saved the message. But it wasn't just her who noticed. During a budget review, the finance manager, Dana, tilted her head. "Why does Mason always insist on running his numbers through you? We have a shared platform." Claire shrugged. "He likes a second pair of eyes." Dana tapped her pen, clearly unconvinced. "That second pair seems to only wear red lipstick on Mason days." It was a joke, maybe, but Claire felt the weight of it linger. That night, as she sat in bed, laptop dimmed, she stared at a message from Mason. "You're the only person here who actually gets the vision. Can't do this without you." It was professional, technically, but the subtext hummed. She typed, deleted, retyped, then finally sent, "I'm here. Always." Then closed her laptop before she could see his reply. She told herself she was in control, that there were no rules being broken, just boundaries being tested, and maybe, for the first time in years, Claire felt seen. But beneath the flattery, beneath the thrill, something inside her flickered with warning. The feeling that she was moving toward something irreversible. And that Mason Cole, for all his charm, wasn't walking toward her. He was waiting, already where he needed to be. Waiting for her to cross the line. The company holiday party was a blur of silver lights, half-finished cocktails, and playlists that tried too hard. Claire showed up late, not intentionally, but not entirely by accident either. She liked the way people's eyes turned when she walked in. A soft pause. A flicker of curiosity, and then his eyes. Mason's. They hadn't spoken all evening. Not directly, but his gaze had landed on her like a secret. 30 minutes in, Claire stepped outside to the rooftop balcony to answer a client email. Mason followed. He didn't say a word. He just held the door, then stood too close as she typed. When she hit send, she turned. He kissed her, no setup, no warning, and she didn't stop him. They didn't return to the party. The next morning, Claire arrived at the office an hour late. Her coat collar was turned up. Her voice was hoarse. When she passed Dana's desk, the other woman glanced up from her coffee and narrowed her eyes. "Rough night?" she asked. Claire smiled. "Just a late one." She didn't see the way Dana's eyes settled on her neck, or how her fingers stopped mid-type. In the bathroom mirror, Claire would later notice the faint red mark just above her collarbone. Invisible unless you knew to look, unless you were looking for it. That afternoon, her best friend at the agency, Nina, cornered her in the break room. "Claire," she said, softly, "are you seeing Mason?" Claire's face stayed neutral. "No." "Okay," Nina said, then added, almost too quickly, "just be careful, he's not simple." Claire laughed, a brittle sound. "Neither am I." Weeks passed. Mason didn't change. Still charming, still attentive, still texting at midnight with ideas about camera angles and mood boards. But now, there were subtle shifts. He was distant just often enough to keep her guessing. Close just often enough to keep her tethered. Then came the test. Claire missed her period, then another. Her hands shook as she held the test in her apartment bathroom. 2 lines. Bold, no ambiguity. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the wall like it had answers. It was a Tuesday when she texted him, "We need to talk." He replied 20 minutes later, "Can it wait? I'm pitching another campaign." She waited 2 more days. Then caught him in the corridor outside the editing suite. "Can we talk, alone?" He nodded, ushered her into a side office. She closed the door. "I'm pregnant." Mason didn't speak for 3 full seconds. Then he exhaled. Not fear, not joy, just calculation. "Claire," he said slowly, "I never made promises. I thought we were just having fun. Besides, it helped your project get approved." "Right." The room went still. Something in her cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but inside. A whole belief system crumbled. She walked out without another word. 2 days later, she scheduled an appointment at a clinic outside the city. No one came with her. She told no one, not even Nina. The night after, she opened her laptop and deleted every message Mason had ever sent. But the echo remained, the memory of his voice in her ear, his hands on her waist, his words after, "It helped your project get approved." She didn't cry, but she also didn't sleep. And from that week forward, something essential about Claire changed. She still smiled in meetings, still delivered her work, but the light was gone. She no longer dressed for attention. She no longer checked her phone. When Mason passed her in the hallway, she didn't look up. She wasn't bitter. She was hollow. And no one, not even the people who claimed to care, noticed the difference. Claire sat through the Monday morning briefing like a ghost in a meeting full of the living. The projector hummed, slides flipped, voices filled the air, brand performance, campaign projections, pitch schedules, but her mind floated somewhere else. The sharpness that once defined her, her precision in feedback, her instinct for narrative timing, her uncanny ability to turn data into emotion, had dulled to an absent stare. She hadn't spoken once. No one asked why. In the past, Claire would have been the one moderating, refocusing conversations, challenging lazy assumptions. Now, she only nodded when spoken to and rarely contributed beyond what was expected. Her fingers still typed emails. Her calendar remained booked, but the pulse of her work, the conviction, the spark, was gone. The whispers started on a Thursday. First in the hallway, behind semi-closed glass doors. Then in the break room, punctuated by coffee sips and forced laughter. Claire heard snippets. She got the production bump approved awfully fast. Guest dinner with Mason was productive. Is that all it takes now? The words weren't loud, but they were aimed, and they landed. She tried to keep her posture neutral. She still wore the same clean lines, the tailored dresses, but she could feel her colleagues recoiling, like smoke after a match was struck. They didn't confront her, they just started to disappear. Lunches she used to be invited to became silent gaps in her schedule. Brainstorms, once electric with energy, now felt like procedural obligations. People left her off of side chats. Her team stopped looping her in on creative huddles. Even Dana, who once teased Claire for her lipstick patterns, offered only curt nods in hallways now, as though to acknowledge her would be to endorse something shameful. Claire's manager called her in late one afternoon. His tone was measured, but distant. "You've been disconnected, Claire. The leadership team is noticing. There's concern about your engagement level." She stared at the framed quote on the wall behind him, "Excellence is a habit, not an act." It felt like a punchline now. "I'd like to take some time off," she said, her voice steady. "Just a week or two." He agreed too quickly. At home, the silence hit harder. She tried to read, failed, tried to write, anything, ended up staring at blank documents. Eventually, she started a draft email to Mason. Just to say something, to ask why. The first email was a single line. "Did you ever mean any of it?" Delete. The second, longer. "I thought you saw me. Not just the job, not just the approval signature." Delete. Each day she wrote a new version. Each day she refused to send. Then came the dream. In it, she was seated in a bright, windowless room. A conference table stretched endlessly. Around it sat people from her office, account managers, designers, clients, all of them watching a screen as messages scrolled, her words to Mason. Intimate, hopeful, trusting. No one said a word. One by one, they stood and left the room. No anger, just disappointment. Claire woke up with tears already on her cheeks. She didn't cry often. She hadn't cried when she found out about the pregnancy, not even at the clinic. But that dream, the abandonment, the shame, the stripping of her humanity into a string of misused sentences, was too sharp. She sat in the dark of her apartment, tea cold on the table, and finally admitted it. The heartbreak wasn't about love. It wasn't even about Mason. It was the realization that she'd been a means to an end. That someone had used her vulnerability as leverage, and no one else seemed to think that was worth mourning. She wasn't heartbroken, she was disposable, and in the world she lived in, where deadlines beat dignity and approval signatures masked manipulation, no one mourned the tools. Not once they'd served their purpose. Claire closed her laptop. There was nothing left to write. The email arrived with no subject line, just a corporate sender and a timestamp. Claire read it 3 times before the words made sense. "We accept your resignation. Effective immediately. Your access will be revoked by end of day. Thank you for your contributions." No salutation, no name, just a final, cold dismissal from the only world she'd ever given her best to. She closed her laptop and stared at the reflection on the screen. Her eyes were tired, not from lack of sleep, but from the constant calculation, how to move, who was watching, what to say without saying too much. The decision to leave had been hers, technically, but the way the HR department treated it, as something to be swept off the desk like a paperclip, only made the hollow inside her chest echo louder. A week later, Mason Cole stood on a stage in downtown LA, holding a slick golden trophy under spotlights. He thanked his team, the agency, the visionary spirit of modern advertising. Claire watched the live stream from her mother's kitchen, dressed in an old college hoodie. Her tea went cold as the camera caught Mason smiling like a man who had never burned someone to build his pedestal. She turned off the stream. There was no outrage, no catharsis, just exhaustion. The days that followed melted into one another. Claire unplugged, deleted every social media account she owned, stopped checking industry forums. Her resume stayed untouched in her inbox. Even emails from recruiters went unread. Her mother, a retired schoolteacher with a knack for silence, gave her space. They shared breakfasts in quiet, the way one shares grief. Claire weeded the garden, helped alphabetize old photo boxes, and only cried once, silently, in the laundry room, holding a shirt that smelled like lemon detergent and regret. One evening, curiosity, or maybe masochism, drove her to search Mason's name. A Reddit post had gone viral, an anonymous account detailing a nearly identical story. Another woman, another favor, traded under the guise of mentorship and admiration. The thread stretched for pages, comments from people sharing rumors, connecting timelines, linking campaigns, a quiet army of women who had all been told they were special. Claire didn't feel vindicated, she didn't feel anything. It wasn't just Mason, it was a system, a culture of charisma and convenience, where charm replaced consent and the victims were expected to stay grateful for the attention. During therapy the following week, her counselor asked gently, "Do you still feel angry at him?" Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I think I'm more angry at myself. For knowing better, and hoping anyway." The therapist nodded, but said nothing. Sometimes, the truth needed no reply. That night, Claire sat by the window, a blanket around her shoulders, watching dusk fold over the hills. A single light blinked on in a neighbor's house. For the first time in weeks, she noticed the sound of wind rustling through leaves. It didn't fix anything, but it meant she was still here, still listening, still capable of noticing something that wasn't pain. Claire's new mornings began with silence. Not the heavy silence of grief, or the taut kind that comes from waiting to be judged, but something gentler. She woke before the sun, boiled water for her favorite white tea, and sat by the window as Montana's mountain light began its slow descent through pine silhouettes. It was in this stillness, away from clickbait headlines and client briefings, that Claire began to return to herself. She didn't return to the industry. She didn't craft pitches or chase campaigns. Instead, she began teaching creative writing online, mostly to high school students. Teenagers from across the country submitted short stories and essays filled with rawness, breakups and bruised friendships. Poems about gender identity, tales of sci-fi rebellions or suburban claustrophobia. In their unfiltered voices, Claire found a strange, steadying comfort. She gave detailed feedback. She left voice notes that said, "This metaphor, this one right here, it sings. Don't ever be afraid of your voice." She didn't tell them what she used to do, or what had been done to her. She only told them that writing could be a home, when the world no longer felt like one. Her days became rhythms, a cup of tea, an hour reading student work, long walks on gravel roads that kicked up dust and memory. Her nights no longer belonged to sleepless spirals, but to fiction she wrote for herself, journals no one would see. One morning, a message arrived through the teaching platform's inbox. It was unsigned, the sender name anonymous. "You were the best strategist in that building. If anyone should have been directing, it was you, not him." Claire stared at it for a long while. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. Then she deleted it, not out of pain, but because she had stopped needing permission to believe in her own worth. In the evenings, she sometimes opened an old leather-bound notebook and wrote lines she never planned to share. It was less about the story now, and more about the act, her pen on paper, her thoughts made real. Reclaiming the narrative wasn't about revenge. It was about authorship. In one entry, she wrote, "They called it an affair. But to me, it was the cost of being naive in a world run by predators. I wasn't a lover, I was leverage." She didn't cry after writing that. She simply capped her pen, turned the page, and stepped into her backyard. The sunlight fell soft across the grass. Wildflowers bent with the breeze. A child from a neighboring house laughed as a dog barked excitedly. She breathed in the air, untouched by traffic or pretense. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Claire didn't feel like she owed the world an apology for having loved, or for being broken by it. She just stood in the light, a woman learning how to live again. Not as a victim, not even as a survivor, just as herself. And that, finally, was enough. I used to think stories like that only happened on social media, women being scammed, seduced, manipulated, until the day I received a transfer receipt in my name, to a bank account I had never seen. It was printed on glossy paper, folded neatly, slipped under my office door. No sender, no explanation, Just a sum large enough to make my stomach twist and my breath catch. $12. Signed off electronically by me. And the account, registered to someone named Brian Lang. The name rang faintly, like a note struck on the edge of memory. I stared at it for a long time. But we're not there yet. 3 months earlier, my life was painfully orderly. I was Melissa Grant, 39, Deputy Director of Sales at Grafton and Wilder, a mid-sized but ambitious tech supplier based in Chicago. Divorced, childless, efficient. My days were spreadsheets and conference calls, client luncheons and quiet evenings spent with microwave dinners and muted television. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I knew the layout of my life down to the last decimal. What I didn't see coming, what no pivot table could have predicted, was the intern. He came in like most do. Polished resume, cheap cologne, anxious smile. He had a messy kind of charisma, hair that was just a little too long. Laughter that landed a half-second late. Brian Lang, 23. Recent marketing grad, on a 3-month rotation. I barely registered him the first week. HR had them fill out forms, sit through onboarding videos, and then scatter them across departments like confetti. Brian ended up on my floor. He wasn't even assigned to my team. Yet he lingered. The first time I noticed him, really noticed him, was during a morning meeting when my laptop froze mid-presentation. It was a Tuesday. I remember because it was bagel day. I remember because he appeared next to me with a calm I didn't expect. Crouched beside my chair, and tapped a few keys before whispering. Control plus Shift plus ESC usually does it. You've got too many Chrome tabs open. I laughed, maybe too sharply. He smiled back. There was something rehearsed in it. Something that should have triggered me. The second time, it was coffee. I had left my mug in the break room, an oversized, chipped monstrosity with the words "Queen of Numbers" in pink cursive. Somehow, it showed up on my desk. Still steaming. Thought it might be yours, he said, leaning on the partition. It looked loved. I didn't ask how he knew I liked 2 sugars and no cream. He began to appear more often. Not in a stalking way, nothing overtly inappropriate, but in that slippery, subtle rhythm that makes you question if you're imagining it. He'd pass by when I was walking to the printer, stand behind me in the elevator, drop casual remarks that felt too personal to be coincidental. Must be hard, carrying a team that underdelivers. Ever think you're the only adult in the room? Bet you didn't always want to be this alone. He said these things with a grin, like jokes, but they landed like darts. And God help me, I started to look forward to them. You have to understand something about me. I don't flirt, I don't even linger. After the divorce, I built walls out of performance reviews and quarterly goals. I told myself love was for the idle and delusional. I told myself being admired was a currency I no longer needed. But Brian Lang didn't knock. He slipped through the cracks. He started staying late, said he preferred to work when the office was quiet. I nodded, silently grateful for another presence in the silence. We began sharing small, ridiculous things, memes over Slack, coffee runs, an occasional, want to grab something quick, after hours. Then, one evening, it happened. The cleaning crew had left. I was reviewing a pitch deck. He brought Thai food, sat across from me, told me about his student loans, his mother's surgery, his dreams of starting his own brand one day. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke about wanting to be seen. Really seen. I looked at him and, for the first time in years, I felt something flicker. Dangerous, familiar, human. He reached across the table, touched my hand. I didn't pull away. I should have. God, I should have. But instead, I let myself believe in second chances, in connection, in something sweet carved from the rubble of middle age. I didn't know then that he had already started drawing the blueprint. That every shared laugh, every brush of the arm, every late night, "Thank you for believing in me," was just foundation for something that would cost me everything. We weren't supposed to be anything more than mentor and mentee. That was the lie I told myself. It started with the kind of text that could pass as professional. A question about a sales model. A joke about the company's bloated CRM system. But his messages always came late, 9:47 p.m. 10:12, sometimes just after midnight. The tone changed, less curious, more confessional. He asked me what my favorite movie was, then sent a voice message saying he'd watched it twice just to understand me better. I listened to it in bed, pressing the phone to my chest when it ended. We had lunch off-site more often now. Always his suggestion, always somewhere dimly lit, tucked into corners of the city that felt a little too cozy. He told me his mother had cancer, that he couldn't afford her medication, that he was skipping meals. He said it so casually, like he was embarrassed to even bring it up. "Don't worry," I said, "I want to help." He hesitated, then smiled like he'd just been given permission to breathe. The first transfer was $500. Then $1.20 for a used MacBook. Then $900 for back rent. Each time, he said no. Each time, I insisted. And each time, his gratitude grew more poetic. "You have no idea what this means to me," he wrote one night. "No one's ever believed in me like this." He made me feel like a savior. At work, he kept his distance. Smart. Careful. Calculating. He'd glance at me during meetings with that slight lift of his brow. A private signal just for me. I caught myself rearranging my schedule to be near him. I told myself I was being supportive. That's what mentors do. But then came the account. He said he was applying to a night program. Needed to prove financial backing. I offered to be a guarantor. The bank refused, so I created a joint account. Just temporary, I told myself. Just until he was approved. I gave him the password. Then came the whisper of something more. He said he loved me on a Tuesday. We were in the backseat of a Lyft, heading back from a networking event. I was tipsy. He was glowing. His words were quiet but clear. "I know it's insane, but I do." I didn't say it back. I didn't have to. My hand found his in the dark. Video calls became nightly. He'd be in bed, shirtless, shadows falling softly across his collarbone. Sometimes he read me poetry. Sometimes he just looked at me and said nothing at all. I forgot who I had been before him. Then, without warning, the rhythm changed. He stopped texting in the mornings. Called only when I asked. Cancelled dinner, then drinks, then everything. I asked if he was okay. Just overwhelmed. He said, "School, mom, life." I offered more money. He didn't say no, until the day I couldn't find him. His number went straight to voicemail. His email bounced back. I messaged him on Instagram, account deleted. Slack showed he was offline. Always offline. I drove to his apartment. The door was ajar. Inside, nothing. No bed, no posters, no dishes in the sink. Just a faint outline where his rug had been. A neighbor popped her head out. "You looking for Brian?" He moved out, left in a hurry. I stood there in the hallway, holding a bottle of wine and a USB drive full of a marketing project he'd asked me to review. My chest felt hollow. Back home, I checked the joint account. Zeroed out. Even the overdraft protection had been triggered. A message from the bank confirmed 3 withdrawals. All from ATMs in different states. I called pretending I needed to verify something. They told me Brian Lang had completed his internship early. Said goodbye. Left a thank you card. There was no card for me. I opened my laptop and searched every database I could find. There was no Brian Lang who graduated from Northwestern in 2022. There was no Brian Lang with that social security number. There was no Brian Lang at all. Just me, and the echo of a voice I once clung to in the dark. Panic is not loud. It's quiet, like a house just before a storm, everything still, everything waiting to collapse. I couldn't sleep, not for a minute. My bedroom, once a retreat, felt like a coffin filled with stale air and buzzing dread. I kept the lamp on all night, checking my phone every 7 minutes, refreshing messages, dialing a number I already knew wouldn't answer. Every ring was a cruel metronome marking my descent. By morning, my eyes were bloodshot and my mouth tasted like metal. I skipped coffee, just drove, straight to the apartment I'd leased for him. I still had the spare key, though I hadn't admitted that to myself before. The elevator groaned. The hallway hummed with silence. I stood outside his door for nearly 3 minutes before unlocking it. It was empty, completely. No couch, no dishes, no smell, just a silence so thorough it felt premeditated, like he had vacuumed up not just his belongings, but every trace of intention. The space where his books had been left faint shadows. I touched the wall, as if that could explain something. I called the university he said he attended. The voice on the other end sounded bored. Clicking keys. We have no one by that name currently enrolled, nor in the past 3 years. Are you sure? My voice cracked. Brian Lang, marketing program, night classes. Positive. Mom. I hung up. The world tilted. Back at work, I moved like a ghost. My team avoided eye contact. Tasks piled up. I snapped at an analyst during a forecast review, then apologized mid-sentence. My manager pulled me into a glass-walled office and asked if I needed time off. I told her I was fine. She didn't believe me. The whispers started that week. Subtle, but sharp. Pauses when I entered the break room. Slack channels that went quiet. My assistant, Jenna, didn't meet my eyes when I asked about scheduling. Finally, one of the newer hires, Paolo, maybe 24, ambitious and too honest, caught me in the hall. Hey, I just thought you should know, he said. Some people are saying, Brian, that intern, you weren't the only one. What? He was, seeing someone in HR before you, and a contractor from IT. I mean, I'm not judging, just, people talk. I stared at him like he'd just hit me. Later that night, I emailed my lawyer. We met the next day. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet, but enough. She listened without blinking, then leaned back and asked, "Did you ever give him access to any accounts tied to your name?" "Yes." She nodded. "We need to run a credit check." It came back like a punch to the ribs. 3 credit cards opened in my name. 2 payday loans. A car lease. All in the last 2 months. He'd used my social security number. My work ID. One of the cards had a signature that was nearly identical to mine. The banks didn't question it. Why would they? "I can fight this," the lawyer said, "but it'll take time. And your employer." "I know. Because the money trail wasn't just personal. Some of it was linked to our department's discretionary budget. He had used my computer. My access. At night, I screamed into pillows. I threw up twice without warning. I called his number just to hear the void. I told myself I'd been naive. Desperate. I called myself every name I could think of. But none of them felt as brutal as the look in Jenna's eyes the next day when I caught her whispering to someone in the hall and she turned. Startled, like she'd seen a ghost wearing her boss's skin. I had loved a lie. And now, I was becoming one. The summons came on a Monday. An all-staff email went out first thing. Internal audit underway. Mandatory meetings scheduled. By noon, my name was being whispered like a secret someone had dropped and shattered. They called it an investigatory leave. It was cleaner than saying suspension. My badge was deactivated by 2 p.m. I packed my things under the strained silence of a dozen eyes, not one of which met mine. Outside, the winter air hit like a punishment. I stood beside my car, keys shaking in my hand, wondering how a love story had become an HR protocol. The official reason was financial misconduct, unauthorized budget allocations, irregular reimbursements, but the whispers were crueler. Power imbalance, ethical violations, sleeping with interns, being pathetic. By the end of the week, my lawyer had confirmed the company was opening a formal case. They had found emails, ones I barely remembered writing, where I approved expenses that could be traced back to Brian. There were screenshots too, leaked by someone inside, Slack messages laced with flirtation, timestamps that made everything worse. Then came the images. A photo of Brian and me sitting too close at a networking event. A blurry selfie I had once sent him, meant to be private, now watermarked and passed like contraband in internal group chats. I didn't leave my apartment for 5 days, not even to check the mail. On the 6th day, a notice arrived. My mortgage was in arrears. My credit score had dropped over 200 points. Every card maxed out. Collections calls were no longer automated, they came from real people now. Polite, but pointed. I sold my car, then the furniture, then the condo. Every object I gave up felt like peeling away the version of myself I had spent years constructing. Melissa Grant. Professional. Melissa Grant. Composed. Now I was Melissa Grant. Cautionary tale. The lawyer hired a private investigator. It took him 3 weeks to confirm what I had already started to suspect. Brian Lang wasn't Brian Lang. He had used at least 5 different aliases in the past 3 years. Internships in multiple states. Always short-term. Always charming. Always gone before questions caught up. He was a ghost in the system. A shapeshifter in tailored shirts. I asked the pie if there were other women. He didn't answer, just slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were faces, notes, transfers, messages that read like mine. But weren't. I felt sick and stupid. I stopped answering calls, stopped responding to emails. My friends, those who hadn't quietly vanished, sent check-in texts that sat unread. I slept at odd hours, ate cold food, showered less and less. One night, I stood on my balcony and wondered how long it would take to fall. Not just physically, but I didn't jump. Instead, I got in my car and drove. No destination, just distance. I ended up 3 hours outside the city, in a town with more silence than signal. I checked into a motel that smelled like bleach and old wallpaper. In the morning, I walked past a small community center where a sign read, "Volunteers needed. Literacy program, ages 6 to 10. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the way the word "needed" sat on the sign. Like it was speaking to more than just children. The first day, they asked me to read a picture book to a group of second graders. My voice cracked. One little girl reached for my hand. She didn't ask why my eyes looked tired. She just smiled. Something softened. In that room, no one knew my name. No one Googled me. No one cared what I had lost. Only that I was there. And for the first time in months, I was. 2 years passed like wind over tall grass, whispering, bending, but never quite breaking. Melissa lived in a small house now, just outside the city limits where the air smelled faintly of pine and burnt wood. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where porch lights flickered on at dusk like old promises. Her life had narrowed into something gentle, predictable, contained. She worked 3 days a week as a guest facilitator at a community learning center. The classes were small, mostly mid-level professionals hoping to improve soft skills. Communication, conflict resolution, workplace empathy. She spoke about boundaries now, about clarity, about not mistaking charisma for character. Her voice was calm, even warm, but her eyes, they never fully softened. Something in him remained watchful, as if she was still scanning for fine print in every compliment. Every handshake. She didn't tell her students about the scandal. She didn't have to. Her name, once Google's favorite headline, had long since faded into search result purgatory. And in this place, no one asked. They just called her Miss Grant and thanked her for making them feel heard. There was peace in anonymity, but not erasure. Memory lingered like a watermark behind every word she spoke. One evening in early autumn, she sat curled on the couch with a mug of chamomile and a book she wasn't really reading. The television murmured in the background, some syndicated crime report show she wasn't paying attention to. Until a name snapped her back to the present. Authorities in Arizona have arrested a man accused of defrauding multiple women across several states. Brian Lang, also known as Carter Holt and Drew Mason, was captured after a 6-month sting operation. She stared at the screen. His face hadn't changed. The same lazy smile, the same disarming eyes. He looked almost bored in the mugshot. The anchor continued. Among the charges, wire fraud, identity theft, coercion, and aggravated impersonation. Victims include a medical researcher, a school principal, and a retired army captain. Melissa didn't move. The mug warmed her hands. The steam blurred the edges of her vision. She thought maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd scream. But instead, she reached for the remote, turned off the television, walked into the kitchen, and made herself another cup of tea. The past no longer surprised her, but it also no longer owned her. A week later, in class, one of her students, a young woman with sharp eyeliner and too many questions, raised her hand during a module on professional relationships. "Miss Grant," she said, "have you ever been in love with someone at work?" There was a pause, a shift in the room's rhythm. Even the projector hummed quieter. Melissa smiled, not bitterly, not sadly, just softly. "I once fell in love with a shadow," she said, "but now, I only follow the light." The girl blinked, then nodded, and the moment passed. Class resumed. Papers rustled. Markers squeaked across whiteboards. But something had been sealed shut. Melissa drove home in the dark. Windows down, wind threading through her fingers like silk. For the first time in years. She didn't check the locks twice before bed. She didn't dream of him anymore. Only of quiet rooms, warm cups, open doors. And when she looked in the mirror that night, she didn't see a victim. She saw someone still standing. Someone who had been shattered, and rebuilt differently. Not the same, but still whole, in her own way. You can forget the one who made you laugh, but you'll never forget the one who made you lose trust. And Melissa Grant would never forget. But she had learned to live beyond it. "I used to think classroom gossip was harmless, until I became the subject of every parent's angry email." At 34, Lauren Hayes had long learned to live within boundaries. She wore neutral tones, used soft fonts in her lesson plans, and smiled just enough to be liked, but not misinterpreted. Her students loved her. Parents trusted her. She wasn't flashy or political. She was safe, dependable, the kind of teacher who stayed late to staple reading packets and volunteered to supervise lunch even when it wasn't her turn. She had been divorced for 3 years. No children. Her ex-husband was a physical therapist who now lived in Denver with a yoga instructor and a husky named Echo. Lauren didn't talk about it. Didn't need to. Her life had downsized into something quiet and structured. A little too quiet, maybe, but it kept her safe. The year-end party was the school's biggest event. Students from all grades performed songs, dances, or skits. Parents brought homemade food. Staff wore matching shirts with the school mascot on the back, an owl with cartoonishly large glasses. Lauren was in charge of organizing the stage schedule, decorations, and coordinating with the PTA. "Because you're the most organized," Principal Mitchell had said during the planning meeting. "And let's be honest, you're the only one the PTA doesn't terrify." That earned a chuckle from the teachers. From Lauren, a tight smile. Principal Mitchell, Robert, officially, was 45. Tall, sharp-featured, and always a bit too polished for a public school administrator. He had a voice that commanded attention and a smile that knew it. He was married, had 2 kids in high school, and a reputation for staying late to catch up on paperwork. Lauren had always seen him as a benign fixture, respectable, composed, distant, until he started staying later on the same days she did. At first, it felt coincidental, but then she noticed the pattern. The shared coffees in the teacher's lounge. The way he lingered a beat too long when they passed in the hallway. During one of the rehearsals, he came to check on progress. She was adjusting a student's microphone when he leaned close to speak to her. Not necessary. Not with the volume in the room, and his hand briefly touched her lower back. A polite gesture, but his hand stayed just a second too long. Lauren told herself she was imagining it, that it was nothing, that it was easier not to think about. But once she noticed, it became impossible not to see. The way he looked at her during staff meetings, never inappropriate, but always lingering. The way his jokes were aimed at her, and only her. The way he asked if she was getting enough support, or taking time for herself. During a team photo with the 5th grade teachers, he stood behind her. His hand landed lightly on her shoulder blade. She froze, smiled for the camera. Later, looking at the picture, she felt a strange mix of warmth and nausea. He started texting her. At first, it was strictly professional, confirming rehearsal times, asking about student absences, but then came a, "You crushed it today," after the PTA meeting. A, "Hope you get some rest," after she stayed late fixing stage props. Then, one night, at 10:43 p.m., "Sleep well, Lauren, you deserve it." She stared at her phone for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "Thanks" smiley face, and then deleted it. She typed, "Good night, you too," and deleted that too. Finally, she just put the phone face down. She didn't sleep that weekend. She tried to talk herself out of it. Maybe he was just kind. Maybe he treated everyone that way. Maybe she was lonely and reading into things because no one had flirted with her since 2020. But on Monday, during the staff meeting, he made a joke about how Lauren keeps this place from falling apart. Everyone laughed. He didn't. He just looked at her. And she smiled back. Just a little too long. She told herself it was harmless. It wasn't. It started with emojis. He would send a thumbs up, a clapping hands icon, and once, a red heart. Lauren remembered staring at it. Her breath caught in her chest, unsure if it had been a mistake. But then it came again. A wink, a, "You're amazing," with a smiley. No one else messaged her like that. No one else used her name like punctuation. "You handled that perfectly, Lauren. That idea was genius, Lauren." Her name looked different when he typed it. Personal, deliberate, heavy with attention. Their work conversations had always been efficient, quick, but now they were layered with little extras. A joke about the gym teacher's obsession with cones. A gif of a stressed-out cartoon owl. A casual, "Wish I could clone you." She began checking her messages first thing in the morning. His name gave her a jolt of anticipation. It had been a long time since anyone's name did that. The school year was winding down. The year-end performance was less than 2 weeks away. Lauren was constantly at school, coordinating with parents, printing programs, reordering decorations after the delivery was messed up. Robert, she had started calling him that in her head, was always there too. Helping, watching, staying late. One night after a long rehearsal, she was closing up the gym when she heard his voice behind her. "You're always the last one out," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You ever let anyone take care of you?" She laughed, unsure of how to answer. "I'm not very good at that." "You deserve better than good." He said it softly, like it was just a truth, not a compliment. She felt her face grow warm. They sat in the empty cafeteria. He opened a bottle of wine from his car, leftover. He said, "From a staff party." It felt wrong, but she didn't stop him. She took the plastic cup he poured, drank slowly, talked about teaching, divorce, silence. He shared something about his wife not understanding the pressure of the job. The way the loneliness sometimes crept in even when surrounded by people. His tone was too intimate, too easy. Her smile turned tired. "You don't have to explain anything," she said. "We've all got our ghosts." He looked at her like she was the only person who had ever said that. And then came the night of the party. The gym was transformed. String lights draped from the rafters. Music from rented speakers. Folding tables filled with crockpots and Costco trays. Kids wore mismatched outfits and sticky smiles. Parents mingled, holding paper cups and paper plates. The air buzzed with sugar and exhaustion. Lauren wore a red dress. It wasn't flashy, but it stood out. Her hair curled at the ends. Her lips a shade darker than usual. She hadn't dressed for anyone. Or so she told herself. Throughout the evening, Robert hovered near the edge of her awareness. A nod from across the gym. A touch on the shoulder. A moment too long watching her laugh with a student's father. After the performances, after the final round of applause, the kids scattered. Some parents lingered, chatting. Someone brought out another bottle of wine. Someone else turned down the lights. Lauren didn't remember how it started. Maybe he leaned in. Maybe she did. Maybe the wine blurred the distance. Maybe the months of tension just snapped. But she kissed him, right there, beside the refreshment table, in the soft spill of colored lights, in full view of the stage. and in full view of a 10-year-old with an iPad. The child had been filming her little brother's song earlier. The camera was still rolling. Unintended, unforgiving. The clip was just a few seconds long. But enough to show the kiss. Enough to capture the moment when Lauren forgot the boundaries that once protected her. The video hit TikTok before the janitors had finished sweeping up confetti. And by morning, she wasn't just Lauren the teacher anymore. She was Lauren, the scandal. The call started just after 7 a.m. The school's office voicemail was full by 8. By lunchtime, the front desk had fielded over 50 emails, most of them titled some version of unacceptable behavior from a staff member. Parents weren't just angry, they were appalled. Lauren's inbox was flooded with questions masked as condemnation. How could you do this in front of the children? What example are you setting? We trusted you. The video had been shared in a local parenting Facebook group with the caption, "Guess what our kids saw last night?" It had more than 10,000 views by the end of the day. Lauren didn't leave her apartment that morning. She stared at her phone, rereading Robert's final message from the night before, "Get some rest. You were amazing." There was no follow-up, no reassurance, nothing. She was summoned to the superintendent's office that afternoon. The assistant avoided eye contact. The HR manager barely said hello. Robert was already there. He didn't stand when she walked in. He didn't smile. His face was carved in polished, performative concern. The meeting was clinical. He said he was taken by surprise, and deeply disturbed by the incident. That Lauren had shown poor judgment under the influence, and had crossed boundaries inappropriately. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You kissed me," she said quietly. "I was caught off guard." He replied without blinking. She turned to the HR representative. "We were both drinking." He brought the wine. The HR manager didn't flinch. "We're not here to assess past behavior. We're focused on public fallout and professional standards." It wasn't a conversation. It was a conclusion. Lauren was placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. By the time she returned home, her name was trending locally on Twitter. A colleague texted, "You okay?" Another sent just one word, "Yikes." Only Mrs. Brennan, the oldest teacher at the school, called. Her voice was soft. "I told them you were a good person. That you just made a mistake. But you know how this place works." The silence between them said the rest. At school, sides were quietly drawn. Some staff unfollowed her online. Others sent passive-aggressive messages like, "Hope things calm down soon," or, "Thinking of you," but also the kids. Rumors spread fast that she had always been too close to Robert. That she flirted with dads at pickup. That she thought she was better than everyone. She always played innocent. Someone wrote anonymously on a teacher forum, "Maybe we should have seen this coming." Lauren read every word, and every word felt like a nail. She stopped sleeping, started second-guessing everything. Was the dress too red? Did she laugh too loud? Was she lonely or reckless, or just stupid? She wanted to scream, to drag Robert into the same fire, to shout, "He flirted first. He texted first. He stayed late on purpose. He brought the damn wine." But even as the rage built, the shame curled around it tighter. She thought of his wife, his kids, how calm he had looked in that office, how convincingly he played the victim. She saw it now, clear as the hallways she used to walk with pride. He never cared. He just liked the control. And Lauren, she was just another name in his long, quiet game. Except this time, it had gone public, and she was the only one paying for it. The official email came 2 weeks later. The principal had undergone an internal review. There would be no termination, no public reprimand, just a realignment of leadership practices, and increased oversight moving forward. Robert Mitchell would remain in his position. Lauren, on the other hand, had been offered a transfer. Not a firing, not a demotion, a quiet relocation, a new school on the other side of the district. Fewer students, fewer eyes. The phrasing in the letter was coldly careful, to ensure continuity and minimize disruption. She read it 3 times. The meaning was clear. She was being erased for the sake of everyone else's comfort. She was not invited to the end-of-year celebration. Her name was left off the thank you slide during the closing assembly. Students weren't told why she was gone, just that Ms. Hayes had accepted a new opportunity. On a local parenting forum, her name continued to circulate like a warning label. The red dress teacher, the one who kissed the principal, not safe around kids. The video had disappeared from TikTok after several complaints, but screen recordings had kept it alive. She saw it reposted with voiceover commentary. Meme pages turned it into punchlines. No one mentioned Robert's name, only hers. She deactivated her Facebook, then Instagram, then LinkedIn. The silence afterward was heavy, but strangely merciful. No more DMs from strangers. No more passive-aggressive messages from coworkers. Just a blank space where her digital identity used to be. Her apartment, once cozy, felt like a closed room now. She stopped unpacking the groceries properly, ate standing, slept less. She thought about moving but couldn't afford it yet. She reached out to a friend from grad school, an old teaching buddy she used to share articles and wine with. The message was marked read, but never answered. She tried joining an online education forum to share an article about power dynamics in schools. Her post was flagged and removed. Please refrain from pushing personal agendas, the admin noted. Lauren didn't reply. Instead, she opened a blank Google Doc. She began writing, not as Lauren Hayes, former elementary school teacher, not as a disgraced name on a district memo, just as a woman with a voice, with thoughts, with something left to say. The blog had no pictures, no bio, just words. At first, short reflections, then longer essays, on the unseen labor of teaching, on silence and complicity, on the hunger to be seen without being used. She didn't advertise it, but people found it. A few comments came in. Quiet thanks. A mother who said she had been forced to resign after a similar scandal. A teacher who said, "This happened to me, too, but no one believed me." Someone called her writing tired but honest. She liked that. Tired but honest. It was the truest description of herself she'd heard in months. She didn't feel vindicated, or healed, but for the first time since the kiss, she didn't feel invisible. In the absence of everyone else's narrative, she had begun writing her own. 2 years passed like weather, mostly quiet, occasionally harsh. Lauren lived in a rural town now, where the nearest grocery store closed by 6 p.m. and the loudest sound at night was wind rustling through cracked shutters. Her world had shrunk into something simple, manageable, a converted barn with peeling white paint, 2 rooms, and a garden that refused to grow anything but lavender. She taught part-time at a local elementary school, support work mostly. Literacy coaching, small group reading interventions, classroom assistance. She was paid less, consulted less, and introduced to new staff only as Miss Hayes, our extra set of hands. She didn't mind. She didn't want leadership, or attention, or to be the one with the key to the staff lounge. She wanted a desk by a window, students who needed help sounding out difficult words, and silence in the break room. And that's what she had. Her past life, urban school politics, district memos, clinking glasses at staff holiday parties, felt like something she had watched through a screen. Not lived, not suffered through, but it was still there, like a scar under long sleeves. Once in a while, it surfaced, like during a classroom circle on communication skills, when a 4th grader raised her hand and asked, with the brutal innocence only children possess, "Miss Hayes, have you ever been in love with someone at school?" The class giggled. Some groaned. Lauren smiled, but not the way she used to. There was no flustered blush, no awkward deflection. She looked at the student with a calm that had taken years to earn. "I once mistook attention for affection," she said, "but now, I only give my heart to what truly matters." There was a silence, not confused, not judging, just young minds absorbing something they couldn't yet name. Later that night, she made herself tea, sat on the creaky front porch, and watched the horizon dissolve into lavender gray. She wasn't expecting anything, no texts, no news alerts. She had turned most notifications off months ago. But an old colleague had messaged her. No words, just a link. She clicked. It was a local news clip. Robert Mitchell, longtime principal of Western Elementary, under formal investigation for financial misconduct, mishandling of school funds, and nepotistic hiring practices. He stood outside a courthouse in a navy suit, saying nothing. Lauren watched him for 4 seconds. Then she closed the tab. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just walked to the kettle and refilled the water. Some things no longer needed words. She carried her tea back to the porch. The night was darker now. The air cooler. Somewhere, an owl called. She sat, and breathed, and let the stillness stay. Infidelity may last one night, but its consequences echo for years. You can recover from failure. But trust, once broken, leaves a scar that never really fades. Lauren had learned to live around the scar. Not to forget it, but to stop picking at it. She was still tired, but honest. And that, finally, was enough. I thought it was just a work trip, until he locked the door behind us. Vanessa didn't come from privilege. She had clawed her way through commission-based roles, cold calls, unpaid internships, and the kind of casual misogyny that passed for mentorship in corporate sales. At 29, she was finally gaining ground. 3 months ago, she'd landed her first promotion, territory manager for a rising tech firm. The title felt good, solid, a reward earned through pure grit. She lived alone in a high-rise apartment on the edge of the city. With neutral-colored walls, fresh orchids by the kitchen window, and a calendar filled with checklists. Vanessa liked routine. She liked knowing what came next. Taylor, her direct manager, didn't fit in the boxes she built around herself. He was charismatic, smooth in a way that made even the most cynical clients lean forward. 46, divorced, his suits always tailored, his charm always calibrated, never overbearing, always slightly amused. He was the kind of man who knew exactly when to wink. And he seemed to like Vanessa. At first, it was professional. "You've got instincts," he told her after a tense meeting. "The others try too hard. You just know." Then came the public praise. During team huddles, he'd nod toward her like a secret weapon. Vanessa saved that deal. Hell, she saved this quarter. She smiled, awkwardly, unsure how to handle the attention. No one else on the team ever said anything directly, but she felt the shift. The slight distance, the unreadable looks. Then came the assignments, high-profile clients, last-minute strategy pivots. Deals that suddenly needed her presence, even if it meant flying on short notice. "You're my ace," Taylor said once, tapping the table lightly. "My closers know how to win. And you know how to close." She laughed, nervously. She told herself it was just management speak, that she was being paranoid. Then came the Da Nang trip. It was a Friday when he called her into his office. The blinds were half closed, letting in a filtered haze of late afternoon light. He leaned against the desk with the same casual authority he always carried. "Got a situation," he said. "Big client, high value, they've got cold feet, and we're not losing this one." She nodded, already checking her mental schedule. "Flights tonight," he added. "Just us two. I tried to get more rooms, but everything's packed. There's a suite, though, separate sitting area. Should be fine." Vanessa hesitated. "It's urgent," he said quickly. "You're the only one I trust to handle this. I wouldn't ask otherwise." She didn't want to disappoint. Not when she was finally being seen. Not when this account could be her ticket to something even bigger. So she nodded. "Of course," she said. "I'll pack light." On the plane, he was his usual self, easy, confident, warm in a way that walked the line between mentorship and something else. He ordered her wine, made jokes about difficult clients, told stories about early career battles, adding, "You remind me of me when I started, except smarter." She smiled, even laughed, but something in her chest sat strangely still. She told herself it was turbulence, just nerves. When they arrived at the hotel, It was late. The lobby was sleek, quiet, modern. A pianist played something soft and meaningless. The receptionist handed Taylor the key and smiled too widely. "Only one suite left." "Huh?" he said, looking at Vanessa. "Guess we'll survive." She gave a polite smile. It didn't reach her eyes. The suite was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A king-size bed, and a couch in the separate lounge area. Room service menus. 2 glasses already set on the table. She wheeled her suitcase in and paused. "I'll take the couch," she offered. He chuckled. "Relax. We're not 20. You can have the bed. I don't bite." Something about the way he said it made her stomach knot. He poured a drink, sat too close on the edge of the couch, started talking again about the client, about the company, about how people like her don't come around often, about how the world chews up women like her unless someone steps in to protect them. "You know I've got your back, right?" he said, swirling the drink in his hand. She nodded, but she couldn't meet his eyes. Later that night, when she stepped out of the bathroom, towel in hand, she noticed the door to the suite was latched from the inside. Not just closed, locked. She froze. And in that moment, every compliment, every delayed glance, every thinly veiled remark began to stitch itself into a pattern she could no longer ignore. She had walked into something she didn't fully understand. But now she was in it. And there was no turning back. The first evening unfolded with polite silence and champagne. After a long client dinner, Vanessa returned to the suite with Taylor. She kicked off her heels and tried to ignore the throb behind her temples. The meeting had gone well, better than expected, but there was something about being in that shared suite, its plush quiet. The singular hum of city lights through the window, that made her feel like she was being watched. Even when she wasn't, Taylor poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle that had been chilling in the minibar. "To landing a whale," he said, lifting his glass. She hesitated. "To closing," she replied, touching her rim to his before taking a sip. The conversation started with business, debriefing the client's hesitations, anticipating next steps, but somewhere between the second and third glass, the tone shifted. Taylor leaned back, loosened his tie, and studied her. "You know," he said, "a lot of people would kill to be where you are right now." Vanessa smiled politely. "It's a good opportunity." He tilted his head. "Ever wonder why I picked you? Why I fought to promote you so fast?" She paused, setting her glass down. "I assumed it was because I delivered results." He gave a low chuckle. "Sure, that's part of it." The silence stretched. Then he added, "Do you really think I went to all that trouble just for numbers?" She shifted. "I think I need some air." When she stood, he stayed seated, watching her. His voice dropped, smooth and measured. "Before you go, you should know, I have the room mid." She turned. "What?" He gestured casually toward the decorative vase near the TV. "Just in case. For insurance." Her heart pounded. "Are you serious? Don't look so shocked. We've been talking all night. Laughing, drinking. It wouldn't look great on video, would it?" She stared at him, frozen. "Relax," he said, rising slowly. "I haven't done anything, not yet, but think about your options. You're good, Vanessa. You could go far, but you know how fast reputations get ruined. One clip, one misunderstanding, and everything changes." She stepped back, hand instinctively reaching for her bag. He held up both hands. "No pressure, just think about it. One short video, and we never speak of this again. We close the deal, go back home, and your career keeps climbing. Simple." Vanessa didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, staring at the door. Every creak from the hallway, every gust of wind from the air conditioner made her flinch. Her phone was in her hand, but she couldn't bring herself to call anyone. What would she say? That her boss had implied something, shown her a vase, hinted at a recording? That wasn't proof. That wasn't enough. She opened her gallery and reviewed every selfie, every presentation photo she'd ever taken with Taylor. Did she look too happy? Too close? She scrolled, deleting a few out of instinct. Then, as if caught by her own shame, she stopped and dropped the phone beside her. Morning came too soon. Taylor emerged from the master room, suit pressed, hair gelled, as if nothing had happened. He whistled a tune she couldn't place. "Breakfast downstairs?" he asked cheerfully. She shook her head, voice caught in her throat. "Suit yourself," he said, pocketing his phone. "Let's check out by 10. In the car to the airport. She sat in silence, watching the scenery blur past. He scrolled through his emails beside her, occasionally laughing at something on screen. It was as though the night before had evaporated. Just another hotel, another deal, another assistant. On the flight, she sat by the window. Taylor leaned slightly into her space and whispered, "DA next month. The hotel there has a beautiful view. You'll love it." Her fingers clenched the seatbelt. She said nothing. When she got home, her apartment felt colder than usual. The silence was deafening. Her suitcase sat unopened for hours. That night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed. "Great teamwork. Let's schedule DA next month. Should be another big win." She stared at the message, nausea rising in her chest. She typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted again. There was no right response. There was no safe response. And that was the trap. Not the sweet, not the wine, the silence, the engineered silence. Because she realized, slowly and fully, that this wasn't his first time. It wouldn't be his last. She wasn't just trapped in a room. She was trapped in a game she never agreed to play. Vanessa stood in the elevator, holding her breath as the numbers blinked upward. Floor 14, floor 15, each chime echoed in her bones. She hated that she had memorized the sound of silence, the space between pleasantries. The moment someone met her eyes and quickly looked away. At work, she was becoming invisible in the most public of ways. She had started wearing muted colors. No more bright blue blazers or statement earrings. She shrank herself, in volume, in presence, in soul. Her voice, once quick with humor in team meetings, now barely rose above the whir of the coffee machine. But inside, her mind screamed. She kept reliving that night. The soft knock of the suite door, the chilled wineglass against her palm, the way Taylor leaned in when he spoke, not with affection, but ownership. And that moment, the moment he pulled out his phone and casually tapped the screen. A red recording dot blinked in the corner. "You looked relaxed earlier, Vanessa," he had said, smiling. It'd be a shame if someone misunderstood our conversation. She remembered clutching the hem of her skirt beneath the table, the thick taste of bile rising, the way the room suddenly felt smaller, as if the air had been vacuumed out. Now, weeks later, she watched her own life unravel from the inside. She had tried journaling, talking to herself aloud in the car, even attempted to set an appointment with a therapist but cancelled at the last minute. What would she say? That her boss might have blackmail footage of her? That she was afraid to open her inbox every morning? She was too tired to cry most nights. Her body had learned to cope by shutting down. One Tuesday morning, she arrived early and lingered in the parking lot. From her windshield, she saw Taylor walk in. Confident, crisp white shirt, coffee in hand, laughing with the receptionist. The sight made her grip the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. That same day, she was pulled into a meeting by Taylor himself. "Let's align expectations," he said. "You've been distant lately. Clients notice these things." She nodded, silent. "This next quarter is critical. I want your best energy." She stared at him. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. "Do we understand each other?" Vanessa forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, sir." After the meeting, she locked herself in a restroom stall and sat down. Fully clothed, hands shaking, she scrolled through her phone, reaching her finger toward the HR contact again. And again, she stopped. That afternoon, she saw Rachel in the break room. The same Rachel who had said, "I understand." Rachel handed her a coffee. No words, but the look in her eyes was heavy, something between sorrow and resignation. Vanessa whispered, "Do you think it'll ever stop?" Rachel didn't answer for a long time. Then, softly, "Not until someone burns the whole thing down." But Vanessa wasn't fire, not yet. She was ash trying to remember what flames felt like. She skipped lunch again. Her stomach couldn't hold food. Her weight had dropped enough that her mother noticed during a weekend call. "You're pale, Ness. Are you sleeping at all?" Vanessa lied. "Just busy. Big account." One night, past midnight, she received a text from an unknown number. "You were beautiful in Da Nang. Hope we can repeat that sometime." Her lungs collapsed inward. She stared at the screen. Nauseated. Was he taunting her? Was this a burner phone? A trap? She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. She curled into herself on the couch and stayed there until the sun came up. Days bled into each other. Vanessa began cataloging things in her mind. How often Taylor touched her shoulder in public, 4 times last week. How often colleagues referred to her as difficult, twice. Via Slack threads she wasn't supposed to see. How many nights she fell asleep in her work clothes, 5 this month. She was collecting trauma-like data, measuring the slow erosion of self. But the worst moment came during a strategy meeting. Taylor pulled up slides. One contained a photo collage from recent client events. There she was, Vanessa, mid-laugh. From the Da Nang trip. Cropped tastefully, framed as part of a successful engagement. She felt her chest tighten. Her ears buzzed. That moment, she realized, they didn't just erase what happened. They were using her image, her presence, her silence. And she, complicit by survival, had let them. When she got home that night, she stared into the bathroom mirror for a long time. Then she opened her laptop, drafted a resignation letter, didn't send it. Instead, she opened a blank document and began to write down everything. Vanessa didn't cry when she handed in her resignation. She walked into Taylor's office at 8:12 a.m., clutching a single sheet of paper. Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't falter, she only said, "Effective immediately, personal reasons." Taylor stared at her. The faintest twitch of surprise flickered across his face before he leaned back in his chair. Fingers steepled. "Vanessa," he said, "you're being impulsive. You know how this will look, don't you?" She nodded. "Let it look however it needs to." He didn't press, and that, somehow, was worse than if he had. He just nodded and said, "HR will finalize it." When she left the office, the elevator felt colder than usual. No one made eye contact. No one asked questions. She stepped into her car and drove. Not to her apartment, not to the office again. Just drove until the city fell away behind her. She moved into her mother's house in the countryside. A quiet place, where the loudest sounds were birdsong and wind over rice fields. There, in the small room she had once painted lavender in high school. She slept for 14 hours straight. The breakdown didn't come all at once. It came in ripples. First, the insomnia lifted, then the headaches, but something inside remained shattered. Vanessa stopped checking her phone. She stopped opening her laptop. The corporate world, with its jargon and tight smiles, belonged to a life she no longer recognized. A few weeks later, her mother found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at nothing. "You need to talk to someone," she said gently. Vanessa began therapy the following Monday. The doctor said the word aloud, trauma. "What you're describing aligns with mild PTSD. Your symptoms are real, even if the world refused to validate them." At first, Vanessa resisted. She had spent years cultivating control, certainty. She hated that she now trembled at the idea of opening an email. But slowly, she began to accept that healing wasn't weakness. It was rebellion. During one of the therapy sessions, her therapist asked, "Have you considered writing it down? Not for anyone else, just for you." And so she wrote. Late at night, in silence, she opened a blank document and titled it, "Not Every Business Trip is About Business." It wasn't a revenge piece. It was survival through storytelling, a record of what happened, how it felt, how it nearly broke her. She posted it anonymously on a forum for women in corporate spaces. At first, no one noticed. Then the messages started trickling in. A woman in Singapore wrote, "I thought I was alone." Another from Chicago said, "He told me the same line." Same city, same trap. A third simply wrote, "Thank you, I thought I was crazy." Vanessa responded to each of them. Her hands still trembled sometimes. But she replied, because even if she couldn't go back to her old job, even if her resume remained stained by silence, she wasn't alone anymore. One night, she received a message from someone who had been in HR at her old company. "I knew something was wrong. I'm sorry I didn't act sooner." Vanessa didn't reply immediately. She looked out the window. It was raining, the kind of soft, cleansing rain that didn't demand attention. She thought of her old self. The version that stayed late to prove she was worth the promotion. The one who wore red lipstick in boardrooms full of gray suits. The woman who once believed being the best would protect her. That woman was gone. But the one sitting here, she wasn't broken, she was becoming. And that, finally, was enough. 2 years later, Vanessa didn't live in a city anymore. She had settled in a small, quiet suburb along the edge of pine woods and open skies. There was a market that closed by 6, a bakery run by 2 retired sisters, and a yoga studio where she taught therapeutic classes 3 mornings a week. People here didn't know her story. Not really. They knew she was quiet, that she liked peppermint tea, and that she sometimes paused mid-sentence like she was remembering a life that no longer existed. Vanessa no longer shook when she heard elevator chimes or saw a man in a tailored suit. But the echoes still lived somewhere deep in her bones, like a healed fracture that still ached when the rain came. She taught trauma-informed yoga now. Breathing, not breaking, stretching, not striving. She spoke gently to her students about grounding and safety and the wisdom of the body. In her free time, she wrote for a mental health recovery forum under the pseudonym KV Gray. She didn't chase justice anymore. She chased mornings where she could wake up without a knot in her chest. One Tuesday afternoon, she sat on her porch, legs tucked beneath her, editing an article about workplace boundaries. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Regional sales director under internal investigation for allegations of prolonged workplace harassment. She didn't need to click. She saw the name in the headline. Taylor. The article mentioned an anonymous whistleblower who had provided a trail of emails, calendar invites, and an internal chat thread spanning 3 years. There was no photo, but she could see him clearly, still smiling, still unbothered. Until now. She set the phone down. Did she feel vindicated? Not really. There was no fist pump, no celebratory scream, only a deep exhale. She walked into the kitchen. Boiled water, let the tea steep, then carried the cup to the window and stared out at the wildflowers her neighbor had planted. That evening, during a community support circle at the wellness center, someone asked, "Do you still believe in justice?" Vanessa waited, let the silence settle. Then she said, "I believe in healing, not in justice. Justice is a luxury. Healing is survival." No one replied, but a few nodded. One woman's eyes welled up. After the session, a girl barely out of college approached her. "I read your piece, the one about business trips. I wanted to say, I left, too, because of you." Vanessa smiled. It was soft, earnest. "Then we both survived. That counts for something." When she returned home that night, she wrote a new draft. Title: Some people mistake silence for safety. Until silence speaks. She didn't write it out of anger. She wrote it because she finally could. And that, perhaps, was the greatest justice she would ever need.